When did a goofy army recruit nearly break their drill sergeant? I had one recruit paying attention to a bunch of geese rather than us. I made him get up and chase them all away. As they flew in the air, we made him follow them for several hundred feet to make sure they wouldn't come back. I was dying of laughter on the inside. I can pass along a classic boot camp story. I was in the Navy, and in the Navy, your final inspection as a division is before the division officer, or DO, which is usually some junior officer nobody that got assigned that job, but we didn't know that at the time. Anyway, before the inspection, one of our RDCs, or the recruit division commanders, that's what we call the division officer in the Navy, found a locker out of sorts and decided to beat us in our dress blues. That was not fun, let me tell you. Wool uniforms, if we lost our cover, we'd get beat more. It was bad. Anyway, the DO rolls in for inspection, walks up to the first guy in formation, and the guy chucks up. However, this guy is a frickin' genius. He chucked up down the t-shirt in his dress blues, saving the DO from the chunks and us from getting beat even more. The division officer was so impressed at this guy's military bearing that he called the inspection right then and there. A grade of 5-star sailors all round. We still got beat that night, but that one dude was our chucking hero. Standing in formation at Fort Knox, about to head to the range, and everyone needed their gloves. One private comes out without them and the drill sergeant screams, "Private, where the frick are your gloves?" In this thick Tennessee accent he goes, "Well, damn, drill sergeant, I must have done left them son witches up in the stairs." The drill sergeant then just collapsed in tears of laughter. At boot camp, it was time to bunk down, and one of the division commanders showed up and was doing a walkthrough. It was just before lights out. He was going through the head, and then there was a loud scream of, "Oh my god, he's just cranking it over here! Get your frickin' Johnson out of your hands and out of my sight! Why the frick is your Frankfurter staring at me, recruit?" Lights out did not happen as scheduled, and I still talk to the guy who got caught many years later. He was also my bunkmate. A division commander in another division asked a guy if he'd shaved that morning, and the guy claimed he had. The division commander said, "Recruit, you are either a werewolf or you're lying, so which is it?" And the guy responded with, "I must be a werewolf, petty officer." Most of these are even funnier when you remember that the encounters are shortly followed by the poor recruit in question being screamed at and forced to run for a very long time afterwards. I was going through Air Force basic training, and when on guard duty, if an unauthorized person wanted to be let into the bunks, you had to report it to your drill sergeant. Our sister flight's drill sergeant came up while I was on guard and requested entry, so I reported to my sergeant and he had me ask the other a series of questions. This particular sergeant had a bushy mustache, so one question I had to ask was, in what year was Magnum PI cancelled? He dropped out of view from the window laughing, came back up and yelled, "It was never cancelled because I'm still here!" It took everything I had not to crack up. So when you start basic, your body doesn't know how to handle no sugar, caffeine, rigorous exercise, and sleeping schedules, so it's in shock. With this shock, crapping becomes a problem for a few people. Well, every DI after the first week is required to ask around if everyone has gone number 2, and from there he assigns one recruit to track who's gone number 2 and who hasn't. I crap you not, pun intended, we had one guy who'd stand in the barracks at the end of the night rolling off names of people who hadn't gone number 2 yet. Finally, we had another guy who's still on there after 2 weeks, and the drill instructor tells him to go to the doctor. The doctor gives him a get-out-of-jail-free card, essentially saying that at any point, if he says the magical words, "I've gotta go," he can escape any situation. Well, recruit No Twosies, we'll call him, gets the smart idea that he's going to play his new trump card as long as possible. Every time we're getting grilled, it's, "I gotta go," ringing in from the back of the formation. This probably happened 6 times until our drill instructor caught on. Finally, the DI devises a plan that when recruit No Twosies goes to the bathroom, he's going to have a couple of us hold onto his legs and slide him into the stall, exorcist style. The time comes and recruit No Twosies excuses himself, we all follow our DI into the bathroom, and slide him under there like he's the spawn of Satan. This catches recruit No Twosies by surprise. He doesn't know what the frick is going on as the DI is utterly berating him about lying and using this as an excuse to sit on the loo. Then we hear a very audible, "Oh, crap," from the stall. The DI scared the recruit so much he actually went twosies right then and there. The DI then made every recruit look at it and we played taps for it as we flushed it down the toilet. While in basic, we had a female that loved to smile. She was just a happy person in general. Well, my TI, or training instructor, came in and she caught the female trainee smiling. TI didn't like smiling. She walked up to the female trainee and yelled, "Wipe that smile off your face." The female trainee stopped smiling. The TI continued to yell, "No, literally wipe the smile off your face with your hand." The trainee does so. "Now throw it on the ground." Trainee follows orders. "Now stomp on it and scream, 'Die, smile, die,' as loud as you can." The female trainee stood there for a few seconds before following through. Her tiny little voice cracks as she yelled, "Die, smile, die!" And I'll say it took everything I had not to burst out laughing. I had a guy in my Navy division, not really a big deal smiler, just his facial physiognomy. He looked like he was grinning. About the second phase of training, he made an effort to frown to stop the attention. At some point, the division commander asked him what he was smiling about. He responded with something like, "Not smiling, petty officer, I'm just ugly." I had a great team sergeant who had a floater, which is a wonky eye, that he was blind in from an injury in Iraq. So one eye was dead on and worked fine, but he had this one Uncle Ruckus eye that just did its own thing. He was a very physically imposing man with that classic drill sergeant bass-filled voice, and his crazy eye just added to it, and he knew. He told a story about his time as a drill sergeant when two privates had sat down on fire watch and were just kind of being real lackadaisical about their duties when he found them. So he started giving them the business, classic Full Metal Jacket style, and finally he just ended his rant right before he was about to smoke them for who knows how long, when one of the offending privates just says, "Drill Sergeant, are you yelling at us or the water fountain?" It stopped him dead in his rage and he just walked away mid-knife hand. We weren't allowed to talk during chow at the galley. You had to point at what you wanted, another recruit to pass you, and they had to silently pass it over. One recruit wanted a napkin and pointed. The other recruit asked, "This?" The Coast Guard drill sergeant immediately came over, circling him like a shark, screaming at him. They made him put like 10 saltines in his mouth and chew until his mouth was full, and then asked the first recruit if he wanted a napkin again. He could barely get it out, spitting pieces of cracker everywhere. Then they screamed at the first recruit to answer him, but we were all silently cracking up. It sounded like this. "So you want a napkin?" with pieces of saltine flying out. "Answer him!" My friend, cracking up, almost crying, "No, thank you." It was the best. We had two 5'1" stocky blonde guys named Johnson in our company one cycle. Different platoons, no relation at all, but they looked really similar. One day during grass week, a couple of J-hats made them face each other and go back and forth screaming, "You're not Johnson, I'm Johnson. No, frick you, you're not Johnson, I'm Johnson." You have no clue how hard it was not to break into a million pieces after about 5 minutes of that. Oh boy, it's nice when theatre and military matters can come together. Also, in case you haven't noticed, the narrator has had to take the original language down about 60 notches for this video. I was a super light sleeper during basic training. One night I woke up for no reason. The sleeping bay was dark except for the light by the desk where the two soldiers on fire guard were supposed to be awake and alert. Both of them were leaning back in their chairs, dead asleep. I started to throw my covers off and go wake them up. If a drill sergeant came through and caught the fire guards sleeping, we'd all pay. But then I heard a slow scraping sound to my right, off in the darkness. I froze, heard it again, closer, and a few heartbeats later, I almost screamed out loud as I saw the sharp, intense face of our Samoan drill sergeant in the darkness. His face was covered in full camo. He was low-crawling underneath the line of bunk beds towards the fire guards. He had a bayonet in his teeth. We locked eyes and he silently raised a finger to his mouth, signaling for silence. I nodded and sat back to watch the show as the drill sergeant resumed his low crawl under and past my bunk in the direction of the sleeping guards. I have a bunch of stories of funny crap I did to correct soldiers when I later became an NCO myself, but that image, like something straight out of an 80s war movie, will always stick with me. In Navy boot camp, they called forced PT beatings. Everyone knows what a beating is. The Navy doesn't have drill instructors. They call them recruit division commanders, or DCs. One day, standing in ranks, the DC is going around asking random trivia questions about a test we had to take to make sure we'd been studying. He gets to a guy who was eccentric, to say the least. This is about a month and a half into boot camp. DC asks the question, the guy gets it wrong, so DC yells, "No, wrong, beat yourself." Literally everyone knew this meant start doing push-ups, so the expectation is that he'll start doing push-ups, as the DC moves to the next guy in question. I was standing across from the guy and he had a confused look on his face. He looked at his own hand for 5 seconds, then hauled off and slapped himself in the face. It made a loud crack sound. He got himself good. I cracked and chuckled, trying to keep my composure at attention. The DC looked at me, then realized why I had laughed had to do with the slapping sound. He turned back to self-slapping guy and asked him if he slapped himself. The guy says, "You told me to beat myself." Cue the entire barracks cracking up. It was a single moment during boot camp where the curtain was raised and a moment of unadulterated levity came over everyone. The DC couldn't even help himself, so the tough guy persona melted away for a good 60 seconds until he regained composure and made us all do push-ups. The push-ups were an easy price to pay for that moment. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work at a basic training range, and we had a drill sergeant yell at this soldier while they were getting ready to go down a buddy live fire exercise. The soldier froze and started crying. This 18-year-old kid was just in tears for getting yelled at. The drill sergeant yelled at him some more, and he finally gave up because this kid wouldn't stop crying. So he made him scoop tears off his face and put them in his pockets till he filled his pockets up with tears. He did this for like an hour. It was hilarious. In my basic training class, I was a squad leader, which is essentially just a person who does extra chores. Anyways, for reasons unknown, myself and the other squad leaders were doing push-ups in the drill sergeant's office. Now, when you do these push-ups, you eventually reach muscle failure, so you just sort of hang out there in the front leaning rest and try to bust out another push-up every few seconds or so. We're all in there dying, and the drill sergeant says to one of my buddies, "Private Hudson, tell me what's the difference between basic training and being in prison." Without missing a beat, Private Hudson says, "Drill sergeant, in prison they get to watch TV." The drill sergeant cracked a little bit of a smile and then told us to get up and get out of there. During Air Force BMT, my flight was practicing marching one afternoon. As our flight was still fairly new, our marching was pretty terrible. One of the assistant TIs reamed us all out and then proceeded to awkwardly mock us by marching and walking like Jar Binks while giving a spot-on impression. I'll never forget it. Not a drill sergeant, but when I was in basic, I saw 3 drill sergeants surrounding a private who was laying down, and they were all screaming, "Go the frick to sleep right now, private! You take a goddamn nap this very second, you poor tired soul!" Not the exact words, but you get the gist of it. I still wonder how he got himself into that predicament. When I was in boot camp and on forced marches, my drill instructors loved having conversations using the recruits as messengers. The DI at the end of the formation would send a recruit to the front to give the DI up there a message and back. They'd either have stupid conversations or talk trash using the recruit. During field training exercise, the drill sergeant told me to go get a trash bag, then go around and collect as many pine cones as I could. For like 3 hours, I had a bunch of trash bags. He then took a little walk around the grounds, contemplated for a bit, and then said he was mistaken and the grounds looked better with pine cones in them. He ordered me to redistribute all of the pine cones. We had this kid who kept wetting himself. One day, after the range, he informs our drill instructor that he'd crapped his pants right after the showers. Our squad bay starts to hold back laughter, only to be interrupted by, "It's not funny!" from the drill instructor. Awkward silence. Okay, it's a little funny, but we aren't laughing. That man never cracked a smile during the whole thing. I've got to say, that kid is either way more dumb, desperate, or determined than me if he's willing to join the frat bro armed forces with a condition like that. I hope things worked out for him in the long run. A buddy of mine told a story from when he was at basic. One guy had said, "Yes, ma'am," to the female drill sergeant earlier in the day, so when they were all lined up, she was going down the line asking each person if they'd called her ma'am earlier. The guy who did was 4th in line. He heard the previous guys say, "No, drill sergeant," and then he said in all seriousness, "No, ma'am." You see, what I'm getting from these stories is that the military training is like joining a non-consensual improv troupe. In the US Air Force, I heard a training instructor ask, "Are you finished yet?" A trainee by the name of Dunn said, "No, sir, my name is Dunn." The training instructor walked away to avoid laughing. There was this idiot in my basic training group that after he had fired his rifle up on his shoulder, pointed the wrong way, towards the drill sergeant clearing it, with the mag still in the weapon. The drill sergeant, a 6'8" bodybuilder, slammed this idiot into the sandbags, screaming at him, and then the recruit had to lay prone in the dirt while holding a stick for a rifle, periodically saying "bang" for the next 3 hours. Somehow, he still graduated with us. Here's a story from my perspective as a recruit in the Navy boot camp. We had an inspection the following day, so our chief was going around inspecting inside everyone's rack to make sure it was squared away. Eventually, he made it over to my section. He was checking the rack, a bunk bed that opens up beside me, and had it propped open so I couldn't see his face, and he must have kind of forgot I was there. He's searching through this one guy's stuff and sees his small gloves. And he asks, "You know what they say about small gloves?" Now, keep in mind, I don't think any of my division commanders heard me talk up until this point, and I said without any hesitation, "I know that's not true. I wear a size 12 boot, but I can tell you right now I don't have a size 12 Johnson." And my chief slammed the rack shut and looked at me. "What the frick?" He then stormed off to the fishbowl, and all you could hear was him trying to hold back his laughter in the office with the two petty officers. "What is that disgusting crud all over your glasses, maggot?" "I believe it's your saliva, drill sergeant, sir." Closes eyes and waits for death. I saw two guys laugh when a division commander walked in, so he had them stand almost noses touching each other. One would yell, "Want to hear a joke?" and the other would yell, "Ha, ha, ha," repeatedly for hours. It was hilarious at first, but once their voices started to crack, it got old pretty quick. On day 2 of basic training at Lackland Air Force Base, my flight was returning with our newly issued gear after having our heads shaved and other hurry-up-and-wait tasks. Our training instructor told us to go upstairs and stand at attention by our beds. We ran up there tired after attempting to march what felt like 2 miles each way in the August Texas heat. We were all standing there waiting for whatever's going to happen next. After about 5 minutes, Donnie Barnes says, "That Sgt Gates is a jerk, am I right?" And you would not believe what happened. As soon as Barnes said Gates, the locker directly behind Barnes's pops open with a creak. Barnes is frozen solid. Out of the locker pops one leg after another, and the 3 taps as Sgt Gates walks out of the locker and puts his mouth directly next to Barnes's ear and shouts in his gravelly voice, "On your face!" We did so many push-ups. One recruit left his training guide just lying on his rack. My lead division commander decided this was punishable by making the recruit stand in the middle of our berthing, holding the training guide in the left hand, saluting with the right, and then bringing it in and gently whispering, "I love you, training guide. I'm sorry I left you out. I'll never leave you lying around again." That crap was hilarious, especially because we were all put at attention while he did it for 45 minutes. Drill instructor made a recruit stand in front of a tree pointing, saying, "I'm not funny, you are," when he was caught laughing. The drill instructor did actually laugh at that one. Early on in boot camp, we were post-shower and at attention for the hygiene inspection, wearing nothing but skivvies and t-shirts. The DI is walking the line checking fingernails and whatnot when one private's stiff Johnson flops out of his skivvies right as the DI passes him. The DI stops, looks the private in the eye and says, "Private, I don't even like you, much less like you that way. Now put that goddamn thing away before it goes off." The private in question turned purple with embarrassment and tries to stuff his rigid tree trunk back in his skivvies, but he's getting flustered as the guy starts yelling at him for being an incompetent private, and that if he didn't get stowed in 3 seconds, the private would be taking a 10-minute cold shower. Things like, "Do I have to hose you down like an excited chihuahua? Should I call the vet? Good God, private, is that how you greet your mother at night? Stow your gear, goddammit!" Every other private in line was trying not to laugh, and the senior drill instructor had retreated to his office where we could hear him howling with laughter. The private finally gets his junk stowed, and the DI resumes inspection, and you could see he was trying his damnedest not to burst out laughing. Nobody got much sleep that night. There were too many gigglers in their bunks and too many quiet one-liners. Oh boy, you'd think the terror would do something to soften things up down there, but I guess this particular python was paralyzed in fear. I went to Army Basic. I was in the chow line, nut to butt, looking at the back of the guy's head in front of me. All of a sudden, I could feel one of my drill sergeants breathing on me over the separation wall, and he yells, "Carlton, who is your daddy?" To which I responded, "You are, drill sergeant!" My other drill sergeant sprints over and says, "Oh yeah? What does that make me then?" And all I could think to say was, "My mommy, drill sergeant?" Every drill sergeant in the chow hall was dying, and I got the dog crap smoked out of me outside. I have plenty more, either equally funny or possibly even funnier. Like when I was in AIT to be a medic at Fort San, we had to toe to line for bed checks, which is standing on a yellow line by your bunk in your personal training clothes and shower shoes holding your ID card with your tags hanging out, and we used to mess with each other hard in our bay, and right before toe to line, one of my buddies hid one of my shower shoes. So I was in a rush and thinking, frick, okay, I'll just wear one. So I'm standing at half attention in one flip-flop, and my bare foot is just kind of tucked away behind me. Our cadre for check comes up and just looks directly down at my feet, crosses his arms and says, "Carlton, what in the Sam hell are you doing?" All I could get out was to say, "Sergeant, I couldn't find my other shower shoe for bed check." And I think I'd been saving this one up, because he started to smirk and just yelled, "God damn it, Carlton, you're more ate up than a chocolate member in a gay bar," triggering giggles and snickers all throughout the bay. Thankfully, our school cadre were a lot more chill than drill sergeants. We had a TI and TI in training with us when we were marching to a class. Some people were out of step, so the TI started screaming, "Don't you know your right from your left? Did the antenna fall out of your house when you were a kid? Didn't your mommy and daddy let you watch 3-2-1 Contact?" The TI in training lost it, and so did I. I asked my dad about this. He was a recruit division commander. He shrugged and says, "Oh, I laughed. Your hat is called your cover? It's the first day. I wanted some recruits from the back to the front to carry stuff. I said, 'Get up here with your covers,' and they went and grabbed their bed sheets."
What is something that you're never fricking buying again? Glass furniture. I had a glass desk from IKEA for about 2 years, and one morning while I was sleeping, it spontaneously exploded. There was no one piece of it left that was larger than my thumbnail, and it took days to clean up. Apparently that can happen with tempered glass. Tension builds up due to temperature changes, and it just shatters. We had a low-grade earthquake where I live. The glass table shattered 3 days later. Fricking home warranty. I brought a house that had just hit 10 years and got all of the original appliances. "Oh, the appliances are covered," they said, "but only if you buy a home warranty." Sure, it only lasts a year, but these things might break in that year. It's only $500, better safe than sorry. Turns out crap does break. The water heater had a problem, the fridge had a problem, none of it caught by inspection. I go to the warranty people and it's $75 for someone to evaluate it. Cool, I think. Cheaper than buying new stuff. Then everything gets denied. The most random F reasons are given to me. I argue, I'm told that that's what the inspectors said. I get the transcripts and guess what? All of their inspectors said that this should be covered. The warranty company lied to me. I threw the lies in their face and I get back, "Well, it doesn't matter, it still isn't covered." One of the dudes, a plumber I later had come back to help, said these companies never cover anything. Their reason on the water heater? Rust on the unit. He told them the rust didn't cause the problem and was normal. To them, any potential problem is reason for denial. Got a dent in a unit? Denied. Got a scratch? Denied. Here's the real crap part of it though. This was all in my first 30 days living there. Like any reasonable person, I thought I could just call up and cancel and get some, or maybe any, of my money back. You know what the woman told me on the phone? It's not legal to return a home warranty in the first year. We're not talking PMI or fire insurance or disaster crap or whatever. This was just a warranty on things like appliances, and can apply to things like structure. I told the woman she worked for crooks and hung up. So if you're buying a house and they want $500 to $600 to insure your home for a year, do what my plumber said. Save your money and do the repairs yourself. I'm still mad about it and it's been like 3 years. Frick. Cheese, in massive quotation marks, from the dollar store. Oh god, what would that even be made out of? Low-density plastic? I wish I could contact the person who wrote this 8 years ago. A General Electric's made exclusively for Walmart, $50 vacuum. I bought a used Kirby from eBay and we threw the GE over the balcony and killed it Office Space style. Bacon-flavored popcorn. It basically made my entire house smell like sweaty butt. I'm not kidding, it lingered for days. It tasted dreadful too. Allow me to give you my recipe for the tastiest popcorn ever. Trademarked. Microwaved bacon popcorn is gross and inedible. Instead, make some bacon and save the grease. The next time you want delicious popcorn, put 3 to 4 tablespoons of bacon grease in the bottom of a large cooking pot. Apply medium-high heat. When the grease is all melted, add about half a cup of popcorn kernels, enough to mostly cover the bottom of the pan, and put the lid on. Shake somewhat vigorously until the popcorn is no longer popping quickly. Immediately pour delicious popcorn into another container, as it will scorch very quickly if you don't. Depending on the saltiness of your bacon, you may want to add salt, but probably not. Enjoy! I'll keep this short and sweet. I was very thirsty one night shift and thought it would be a good idea to buy 1 liter of sugar-free aloe water. After guzzling the entire thing, I felt quite refreshed. I downed a pita bread and my lunch was complete. Fast forward an hour later and I started to feel a rumbling in my stomach and the urge to pass gas. I decided to hold my toot in at the time and visit the closest washroom. At that very moment, I emptied my entire stomach contents and more into the toilet in the most violent butt explosion of my life. For the remaining 4 hours of my shift, everything coming out of my butt was liquid. I learned that particular aloe water was a very close cousin of the sugar-free gummy bears. 10 out of 10 will not buy sugar-free aloe water again. Food from that shady as frick Chinese food cart next to my building. Something I've said 4 or 5 times already. Oh. Mate, the rule with takeaway food is the dodgier the joint looks, the better the food. Hell, my local Indian joint has perpetual low-lying smoke from all the curries, and the Chinese joint has burnt down 3 times. Both of them do super good takeaway food. That only applies to ethnic food though. Your local chippy shop needs to be squeaky clean. Sea monkeys. They're not tiny humanoids, and their construction skills leave much to be desired. Tyrannizing them is not very rewarding. All they did in response to my oppressive taxation and restrictive curfews was die and turn the water brown. A bicycle from Walmart. Cheap bikes are really expensive to fix. What's the cheapest bike that's worth it, I wonder? A used bike that was expensive when it was new. Good bikes last fricking forever, if you take care of them. My bike was built 30 years ago and it's 10 times better than the piece of crap I used to ride. A brand new $300 folding bike. If you buy a folding bike, you should just assume that it's equal quality to a non-folder that costs half of that. So you probably got the quality of a $150 bike. I honestly wouldn't trust a folder that costs less than $600. Actually, I wouldn't trust a folder that wasn't made by a major company. An inkjet printer. I've probably bought more than a dozen of them over the years, and while they produce outstanding color out of the box, unless you're printing full-on color on a regular basis, like every day, then you're going to get clogs and failures. And don't even get me started on the whole, you're out of yellow ink, so you can't scan anything now, with the all-in-ones. About 2 years ago, I bought a Brother MFC 9340 CDW laser printer for my mother, and a few months later I bought the same printer for myself. No more clogged ink, duplex printing that doesn't even saturate the paper, consistent print quality, wider variety of paper to choose from, and overall cheaper than an inkjet. I'm never going back. That bloody loot crate crap. I only brought it once when I thought the stuff was alright, but it really teased me off now watching YouTubers continually opening crates and then acting like they're so glad that they got a fricking fridge magnet. My How to Learn Buddha's Palm booklet. Clothes from Groupon. Almost anything from Groupon. My last few experiences have been pretty bad. When Groupon was new, you could get some great deals, but now it's spa, crap Chinese products, crappy restaurants, rinse and repeat. Yeah, it might have been a legit enterprise once, but I think by now most business owners have realized that the sorts of people who use coupon deals rarely become repeat customers. They'll come in holding that voucher in front of them like a shield against having to pay full price, grab as many extras as they can, steal your pens, and leave never to return. Signed, bitter former restaurant manager who never got tipped by coupon users. We had a buddy named Dave who once brought over some Klondike bars for a game night and left the remainders in the fridge. When he came back a week later, he was horrified and livid that his Klondike bars, which were left in the fridge of 3 bachelors, had been eaten without his permission. He made such a stink about it that us 3 guys living there, as a prank, filled the freezer to the brim with Klondike bars. We ate and ate them, but the stock never depleted. Some moron would keep the joke going by buying enough Klondike bars to fill it back to full. And when you're young and a cheapskate, you'll eat a Klondike bar before going to find real food. Don't get me wrong, ice cream and chocolate are great, but man, I could go my whole life without eating another Klondike bar, and that was already 15 years ago. Frickin' Dave, man. A frickin' sleep number mattress. Piece of crap is like sleeping on an air mattress, and after a little while the sides lose their integrity, so the only comfortable spot becomes broken down. Forked out a lot of cash for that stupid mattress. The only one who seemed to like it was the cat. Anything from Finish Line. A couple of years ago, I needed a new pair of shoes. Luckily, I had a Finish Line gift card. I'd never shopped there before, but I'd save money with the gift card, so I walk in and buy a pair of shoes. The cashier asks if I'd like coupons sent to me in the mail. I figure, sure, why not? So I wrote down my address and everything. Got my shoes, everything's cool. Fast forward to 7 months later, I have a $60 charge on my bank account from Sports Illust. Something like that, it resembled Sports Illustrated. So, being confused, I call Sports Illustrated and tell them I was being charged for subscribing, even though I could give less of a crap about sports. The man basically tells me, sorry about that, I don't know how that could happen. The charges should be reversed within 3 days. I figured, alright, this crap's finally over. Fast forward 2 weeks later and I realize that the charge has not been reversed whatsoever. I decide that I'm going to call back again after work and talk to them about it yet again. So after work, I check my bank account one last time to see if it was reversed. Not only was it not reversed, but I had another charge that said something like Sports Illustrated Kids, for another $60. So basically, after he told me the charges would be reversed after 3 days, they weren't after 2 weeks, and then they had the big brass ones to charge me yet again. This time I was teed off and called immediately. The tone in the lady's voice seemed like she'd been dealing with this all day or something. She sighed and said, "Have you purchased anything from Finish Line recently?" And I had to think about it, and then it hit me that I did about 7 months ago. And I said, "Yeah, why?" And she said, "Because this has been a real problem with everyone who purchased from Finish Line. I'll have the charges reversed this time, I really will." And after the phone call, I called the bank to tell them about the whole thing. Everything was refunded back to me in the end, but after dealing with that crap, I'm never buying from Finish Line again. Who the frick do you think you are just subscribing everyone to Sports Illustrated unwillingly? I don't even give a crap about sports. I just wanted to buy a simple pair of shoes and that's it. In conclusion, Finish Line signed me up for Sports Illustrated without my permission. I just wanted to buy a pair of shoes. Tried reversing the charges, but instead they subscribed me twice. I had to call the bank to actually fix it. Don't shop at Finish Line.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe.
Those pink, frosted animal crackers. Good as all heck, but I ate way too many when I was younger, and I still get sick even to this day when I think about it. I feel like everyone has that one food that they ruined for themselves as a child. For me, it was a Mexican candy called Lucas. I ate it once when I was extremely sick, and I haven't been able to stomach it since. Which is sad because I remember loving it for a couple of hours. At least until I threw it all up. I will never go with my current ISP fricking ever again if I have the option. The amount of bullcrap I've had to deal with is just insane. First, they brought our previous ISP. I called to cancel the phone line we got for free, along with a free router. The new ISP tried to charge for it, but they say they'll of course remove it. I got a confirmation letter. Get another one. In the end, I got one letter every day for over 3 weeks confirming the exact same thing. Still shows up on my bill. Got charged for TV. It's included in my rent. I call them and they said, sure, we'll of course remove it. It shows up on my next bill. I call again and they claim that the bill was printed before my call. Just pay less than what it says on the bill. Next month, it's still there. They claim the exact same thing, printed before I called. I called the rep on his bullcrap, and all he does is cough and ask if there's anything else I need help with. I mildly lose my crap at this point, but I finally get rid of the extra charge on the next bill. This was all in the span of 3 months. Never again if I have the option. The previous ISP worked flawlessly for over a year. What infuriates me the most is that this is most likely their modus operandi, counting on people not reading too closely what they're getting charged for. Granted, they're reasonably priced at 100 megabits a second for an equivalent of $24 a month, but based on their customer service and general inability to do even the simplest of tasks without several weeks of issues, I'll go with another one next time. What? It's not like an ISP to make every little transaction a nightmare. They instantly and immediately fix your options and give you your money right away, like travel insurance and substance-using roommates who owe you rent. A frozen gluten-free pizza. £3 for a large nacho with a pinch of cheese on it. What a load of crap. Third-party extended warranty. I bought our first family car a few months after getting married. A 5-year-old Dodge Magnum with 50k on the odometer. They kinda just threw the warranty in and I didn't realize it until I was signing papers and I got to the extended warranty page. Asked what the frick this was and the salesman ended up getting me to pay for it. It's only $1,200, pretty cheap peace of mind, right? Right. I'm a family man now. I hate to have any pesky repairs get in my way. I never used it, needed tie rods on one time, but they were considered a wear item, so it was out of my own pocket. Instead of the extended warranty, do your research. Buy cars that don't have overcomplicated parts that break down or require expensive services. I don't buy anything with a timing belt anymore, only chains. Do your maintenance the way your manual says and consider using the severe schedule. Join a forum for your particular car. If the thingamajig shakes when you turn the doohickey, you can bet someone else's thingamajig had shaken before, so look it up. Most of all, this is what you keep an emergency fund for. If you're maintaining your vehicle properly, things shouldn't break, but if they do, have some money tucked away for emergency repairs. Any Steam game before it goes on sale. A cheap vacuum. I have 2 dogs and vacuumed with it the day before I brought a new one. Vacuumed with the new one, Shark Rotator Professional for those wondering, and literally filled 2 trash bags with missed pet hair, having just vacuumed the day before. Rubbers. I'm married and had a vasectomy. I was in the same boat with 2 kids already. Evidently, the US military gives crappy vasectomies. After the 3rd kid, my wife got fixed. Third-party controllers. They only ever last all of a week or 2 before something goes wrong. As fun as they are, those cheap remote control helicopters are probably the most frustrating things to try and control. I think I've owned 3 and they've all broken within 1 week of buying. Beats by Dr. Dre. Why didn't I listen to what everyone told me? Ben & Jerry's changed the Heath bars that they use to some tasteless, disgusting hippie crap about a year ago. I get that they're all about conservation and all, but they screwed up my absolute favorite go-to ice cream of all time. I was in Vermont when they invented Heath Bar Crunch about 25 or 30 years ago, and they were giving it out as samples. I fell in love right then and there, but they've wronged me and cut me deep. Never again, unless I hear they go back to the old Heath bars. Off-brand saran wrap or cling film. It tears if you look at it wrong and won't stick to itself on wraparound. Bullcrap in a box. Wooden tiki torches. They get messed up after 1 season outside in the elements, and half of them come crooked and crack when you put them in the ground. I invested in some nice metal and glass ones. One-ply toilet paper. I bought a big package on accident once and I'll never do that again. My finger popped through that wispy garbage the first time I used it, and I eventually was using ridiculously thick wads of paper to keep myself safe. Toilet paper is one of those products where it's always best to pay more for the good stuff. An engagement ring. The Dyson Ball Vacuum. Man, is that thing named wrong. I couldn't walk for 3 days after using it. I was about to say, mine works great and is so easy to push, and then I caught on. Girly crap. Give me man razors, man deodorant, man shower gel, man everything. Half the price and lasts way longer than crappy girl products. Okay, apparently I'm worse than Margaret Thatcher because I said this. Relax. If you want to use girly products, go ahead. If you want to use men's products, go ahead. I personally find men's antiperspirant, Rexona, to be my choice of deodorant because I'm very active and work outside. Every brand of men's razors have lasted longer than my women's ones. My men's work boots last amazingly better and are sturdier than any woman's work boots I've had in the past. That's my personal experience anyway. Hulu subscription. I can't stand paying for a service and still having to watch through commercials. What? Look, I was never going to buy that service anyway because it just seemed so inherently crap, but that is some complete garbage compared to the other services on offer. Not sure if it's changed in the years since that comment was written, though. Size 46 and above pants. Not a product quality thing, just a quality of life thing. Cigarettes. Full year clean, let's go. A DVD rewinder. Fricking useless. I remember when Blockbuster was first introducing DVDs, and my dad got a notice that he failed to rewind his disc before returning it to the store. Some people are just dumb, he said, but don't threaten me with a fine because of your own stupidity. Any Ubisoft product available for pre-purchase. Dude, any video game for pre-order. It's been a terrible stretch. A Lenovo laptop from India. I brought a Y500 from them, and it was the worst experience ever. I know most people think the company is excellent, but their after-sales service is simply awful. 2 days after delivery, I found that the touchpad wouldn't work properly. After repeatedly emailing them, asking for repair centers, a repair tech, or any number of things, I was told that I had applied for a replacement too late, since I'd bypassed the 1-week replacement limit. I asked them again about repairing the laptop, and they sent over a technician who knew less than I did about laptops. He left the house having spoiled the screen by scratching it with a screwdriver and twisting the fan blade so that the laptop wouldn't start anymore. With infinite patience, I called the repair center and I asked for a repair tech to fix the things the previous guy had done wrong. They made excuses for days and days, doing absolutely nothing. If you think Comcast is bad, this was far worse. I was misquoted saying, "The issue has been fixed," and they closed the case number, telling me I'd have to go through the entire process again. I was given a Lenovo official help center number. That's when I learned the guys I was speaking to was simply a small repair shop that Lenovo had contracted all their Bombay customers to. After waiting on the Lenovo helpline for 15 minutes, listening to crappy elevator music, I was told that the help center was inactive and that I should call up another number. The very same fricking number that belonged to the repair shop. I fricking lost it. The worst part is, in India, it's not possible to sue a company and expect a speedy resolution. All this was happening a few weeks before my exams, and I had a comp sci project due for submission. In the end, I had to give up this new, almost never used laptop to a repair shop that I actually trusted. Their service was far better than anything Lenovo had ever offered me so far, even if it was paid. I ended up using my old HP DV6000 for my exams. I managed to submit the project on time, but seriously, F Lenovo. In conclusion, frick Lenovo for getting me stuck in a feedback loop. A laptop without fans so strong that they can at least ensure that the darn thing doesn't overheat after an hour, unless I purchase another gosh darn ventilation pad for it. Cheap or used tires, a cheap mattress, bottom shelf alcohol. For the alcohol, I generally mean that if I'm getting a drink at the bar, I don't mind spending an extra $1 or $2 for name brand instead of watered-down rubbing alcohol. Yes, I believe the hangover is worse with cheap spirits. Also, if you can't afford a ride home, you can't afford to go out drinking. For tires, I agree that if you have an old beater, you shouldn't be spending thousands on tires. However, I've gotten screwed over a few times with used tires that seemed like an excellent deal, only to be replaced in 10,000 miles. I put a pair of Toyo MTs on my old truck and they lasted me longer than the truck and still looked new after 50,000 miles. Plus, I had one punctured from an accident and it was replaced for free because I spent an extra $20 for that service up front. I can't stand seeing new sports cars that someone spent good money on and they won't spend more than $300 on tires. Also, everyone's saying if it separates you from the ground, this is exactly what I mean. As a closer, gas barbecues. If you only grill a few times a year, go ahead and spend under $500 on one. Just don't be upset when you can't get parts and have to replace the whole thing within 5 years. If you're a barbecue enthusiast that loves grilling for friends and family 5 times a week, spend $4,000 on a Twin Eagles or Lynx. It'll be the last grill you ever buy and sear a steak that would make Ramsay's mouth water. Yes, a $150 Weber charcoal kettle is an amazing grill that will last forever, but cooking 5 times a week on charcoal and needing more cooking area with different temperatures gets old real quick. Plus, a big green egg will smoke any Weber. I've spent the last 7 years designing outdoor kitchens and selling grills while having a private barbecue chef on staff. I think I'm just a bit more of a snob when it comes to my food.
Lawyers of Reddit. What's the dumbest thing you've seen take place in front of the judge? Serious replies only, but some of these are pretty funny. Saw one defense attorney demonstrate twerking during closing arguments of an assault with intent to kill trial. Your Honor, my client is not guilty. Why? Let me ask you this. Have you seen this? Throwing it back for a real one? I rest my case. DUI/DWAI/drug defendants show up to criminal court with beer/weed/F the police t-shirts constantly. During the direct examination of the defendant, the PD kept asking leading questions. After 5 or so sustained objections in a row, the judge had enough and sent the jury out of the room to yell at the PD. During the cross, about 10 minutes later, the judge again sent the jury out to yell at the defendant for trying to tell his story instead of just answering yes or no questions, not to mention he was clearly lying through his teeth. Also, the defendant was recorded committing the crime. So yeah, he was later found guilty. I was in front of a judge for oral argument and the other side, pro per, failed to show up. The judge called him and made him argue against our motion while driving and on his cell phone. The judge spoke for a minute, setting up the arguments for the guy, basically leading him to the core argument and what he should be saying if he wanted to get our motion denied. After a few moments of silence, the guy responds, "Judge, I'm too stupid to understand what you just said." That ended the argument quickly and in our favor. Personal story, I was sued once. Well, they meant to sue me, but actually sued my uncle. Same career. Named him in the documents and served him. Me, being young and clueless, thought I should go to the trial just in case. My uncle told me I absolutely should not. Now, here's where the opposing attorney screwed up. They never once tried to interview or talk to me, or my uncle, or they would have realized their mistake. Day of the trial, my uncle actually made it to the stand. From the way I heard it, questioning was hilarious. Were you working on blah 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 day? No. Please read this payroll statement. Doesn't this payroll statement say you were working? No. Look at this highlighted line. Isn't your name RVW260? Yes. Then you were working. No. This says KVW260 was working. My uncle said even the judge was laughing as he immediately tossed the case. People finding religion in front of a judge at sentencing. The judge would always respond with, "God may have forgiven you, but the state has not." That judge was a boss. Firm, fair, and totally awesome. That's the hardest thing I've ever heard a judge say. One guy I saw said, "Your Honor, I haven't been drinking anymore. I have been clean for 6 months, God is my witness." The judge responded, "Well, a lot of people say that, but the funny thing is, not once have they ever been able to bring him in to testify." The dumbest thing I've seen is a guy show up for not doing his community service in a shirt that said, "I'm not lazy, I just don't like to work." Judge asked him about it, and he said it was his only clean shirt. Everybody had a good laugh, even the judge. Seconds after being served with a protection from abuse order, opposing party flipped off the person who had obtained the order, and seconds after that approached her and asked if they could at least talk about it. Promptly arrested. I'm doing jury selection on a civil case in California. It is going to be a long trial, 6 weeks, so the judge is giving jurors a lot of latitude if they claim any hardship for serving that long. After about 30 minutes of voir dire, which ended up taking 3 days and several panels, one guy stands up and says in very broken English that he can't follow. The judge asks him if he speaks English well enough to render a fair verdict, and he looks confused and says no. The judge thanks him for his service and dismisses him from the panel. In perfect English, accent now gone, he says, "Thank you very much, Your Honor. Where should I put my badge before I leave?" Judge found him in contempt and ordered him to stay for jury duty for the next week. Usually you just stay for 1 day. If you don't get picked for a jury in that day, your service is over. During a plea hearing on a prostitution charge, the state proceeds to give the narrative of events. The SA starts to get a little uncomfortable trying to describe the specific act that led to the arrest. We all know the line he's reading is, quote, "sucked him off," but he's trying to find a nice way to say it for the record. He finally goes, where she then, proceeded to perform, fellatio. As soon as he says fellatio, the defendant stands up and straight up yells, "I didn't do any of that French crap, I gave him a blowjob!" Client said to judge, "Well, that's your opinion. It went as badly as you'd expect." "Thank you, judge. No matter what happens. My objection gets overruled? Thank you, judge. Lose my motion? Thank you, judge. Judge says I'm fat, ugly, and unlovable? Thank you, judge." Unfair dismissal case. My client was summarily terminated for no reason. She recorded the dismissal on a dictaphone. The torrent of misogynistic, hateful abuse her boss spewed at her was unbelievable. He also assaulted her as she was removing the hands-free phone device from her car, repeatedly slammed her leg in the door, causing a fracture, all the while screaming at the top of his lungs, "Screw you, you piece of crap." Suffice to say, we played that tape 1,000,000 times in cross-examination. It was more what didn't take place. I was working for the DA's office, and we had a guy scheduled to appear for a vandalism charge. The guy had a long history of minor offenses, but the judge was in a lenient mood that day, so the guy was probably going to get off light. At the scheduled time, he hasn't showed up. His lawyer tells the judge he hasn't heard from the defendant that day. We wait. 10, 20, 30 minutes. At the half-hour mark, the judge is furious. She angrily tells the lawyer to get out and find his client and get him before her, no matter what it took, or she'd rain heck down upon the defendant. An hour later, the lawyer slinks back into the courtroom. The judge sees him and interrupts another lawyer to call him up to the podium. The poor lawyer proceeds to tell us that the defendant didn't show up because he was actually sitting in jail 2 counties over, having been caught trespassing the night before. Needless to say, that defendant got the book thrown at him. At the end of a DWI trial involving a pretty major wreck, in which the defendant was found guilty, the judge asked the defendant if he had anything he wished to tell the court during the sentencing phase. The guy thought for a second and said, "Your Honor, I'm real sorry. Normally I drive a lot more careful when I'm drunk." Had a client toss his car keys on the defendant table moments before sentencing for his 4th OWI. Judge asked how he got to court. Without blinking, said, "I drove. Why?" Good way to get a quick bail jumping charge for violating his no driving bail condition. We all forget to turn off our phones in court, but I once faced off against a lawyer whose phone rang right while he was in the middle of making his final submission to the judge. Even that might have been forgivable if he hadn't interrupted his submissions to take the call. I swear I was arguing against a preliminary hearing against a defense attorney from out of town, and in the middle of one of his direct examinations, his phone rings and he freaking answers it. "Hello? Oh, hi. Listen, I can't talk. I'm in court." "What? No, I'm in court. I'll call you back." "Sorry, Judge." The look on the judge's face was priceless. Then it was time for him to make the closing argument. He looks at the judge and goes, "One more time, Judge. What were the charges?" "DUI, dude. Just DUI. How did you get through this whole thing and not realize there was only one charge and it was DUI?" This sounds straight out of a lawyer's sitcom, and I would watch the heck out of that. A lot of clients want to speak up, "But Judge, you don't understand." But giving them the look of death and a jab in the ribs usually shuts them up pretty quickly. They're usually pretty okay. I found this gem doing some research one day, quoted from the case. As is evident from the foregoing excerpt from the transcript, the judge would not permit the appellant to speak to the issue of judicial bias. The appellant was agitated. The judge was, no doubt, frustrated. This exchange culminated in the appellant choosing to disrupt the proceedings by commencing to disrobe. The appellant described her actions to the judge as, quote, "a form of non-violent protest, which would continue until the judge would hear her motion for judicial bias." Wish I was there for that one. You don't often hear about a lot of court cases where people take their clothes off, but the formal language used in this makes it 100 times funnier. I do family law. Told 11 clients in a row that they could be drug tested, 5-panel P test, you need to be clean for about a week, as part of the custody evaluation process. 7 of them failed. Lawyer here, I had a case where I was suing a lesbian on behalf of a former lesbian partner. It was a relationship property case. The one who was being sued put in issue whether they had even been lovers, or whether my client was just a flatmate or boarder in her home for the several years they lived together. I had no idea how I was going to prove that, but it turned out my client had saved all of the soppy love notes that her partner had left on the fridge, most of which were, "I love you, you little squishy oyster," and other ribald descriptions. That issue sunk pretty quickly once the box of those were produced. Sorry, that just sounds so wholesome. I would love to be called someone's squishy little oyster. That makes no sense to anyone except me, and that's why that's so special. I've seen a woman pee herself. Situation wasn't so tragic to warrant it, but she was sent back to jail, so understandable. A man called the judge by only his last name, which is great if you think he'll reciprocate the upcoming fist bump, and a large number of high, drunk, and other people say, "This is bullcrap." Also not a great technique in court like the first two. I've got a pretty good one, so hope this isn't buried. Husband and wife are going through a divorce and are having a custody hearing. Basically, the attorney is representing the father who wants to be able to have some rights to see his son, but mother has already been awarded full rights. Father's attorney is super passive-aggressive against the mother's attorney, really rubbing everybody the wrong way. Eventually, the mother's attorney snaps and quips back, "If he was as good of a father and husband as you claim, we wouldn't be here, would we?" Father's attorney has some dumb reply and the judge starts losing his cool. Another few comments later, and the judge ends the hearing. No adjudication, just takes the filings and demands that the parties get out of his chambers. This wasn't in the courtroom itself. In the hallway, the mother's attorney loses his crap, starts yelling at the other attorney. He yells back. They get into a full-on yelling match in the courthouse. Then the father, who is 230 pounds plus, steps between them to entreat them to chill out, starts telling both his lawyer and the wife's attorney that they are acting like children. People in the courthouse are giving them looks, assistants peeking out of doors, and the wife steps in. You're both acting like a couple of kids. Soon-to-be ex-husband and I can handle this on our own." Then the couple who was in the middle of a vicious divorce step aside, talk for a few minutes, and walk back. "He's going to take son Tuesday night. You two," he points to the attorneys, "do whatever you need to do with the judge." I don't know what happened with that case, but it warmed my heart to see a father step between the two trained legal professionals and impress his wife so much that they were able to work things out. The sad part? The husband's lawyer saw it as a win for him because his conduct put his client in a position to, quote, break up the fight and show her that he is a great guy. Update, for those asking, this was in 2009. I don't know the final disposition of the case, just that the mother agreed to let the father spend some time with their son. And yes, this is a true story. I will never forget. We had a defendant bust into the court from the local jail. His case was called and he promptly walked up the podium, looked the judge dead in the eye, and crapped his pants, jumpsuit. He knew he was going back to prison and just wanted to cause as much havoc as possible. People were gagging and there was a general sense of, did that just happen? In the air. I'm going to start off with some context. This event took place on the first day of a murder trial in the Hong Kong High Court. Now, the official language used in the High Courts of Hong Kong is English and not Cantonese. The judge for this particular case was British, but the lead prosecuting attorney was from Hong Kong. Whenever he spoke, the judge had a hard time understanding him. To make things worse, the trial and evidence packet composed by the prosecution was a complete mess and did not include an English version. During the opening statement, the lead prosecution attorney decided that he needed to grab his colleague and act out the murder in order to get the message across. This was not pre-planned, and to make a long story short, the judge adjourned about an hour in to postpone the trial in order for the prosecution to, quote, sort out this mess. That was the dumbest thing I've ever seen in a trial, and I can't imagine how desperate the prosecution was to do such a thing. A case where a large gangster-type defendant was accused of slashing the throat of a small skinny guy. The defense counsel made him wear a large coat to conceal his size, and brought in an interpreter to slowly translate each word of the proceedings because, quote, he had absolutely no understanding of English. 10 minutes into the trial, a cell phone goes off and rings for about a minute. The judge is furious, and the ringing is amplified in the large courtroom. The hearing stops and everyone is looking around trying to figure out where the sound is coming from. Suddenly, the defendant stands up and pulls the phone out of his pocket. It is still ringing, but only louder. The defendant then yells, "Hey judge, I don't know how to turn my phone off." On a hearing regarding a restraining order requested against him, a man raised the defense of, quote, "She be trippin'." Restraining order granted. God bless General Sessions Court. When I was in law school, my school had a mock trial program that took place at the local county court, where the judges were actual judges, prosecutors, and attorneys from the local area. So one day, a mock trial is happening, and one student, who was a law student but not in the mock trial program, is acting as a witness being questioned on the stand. The person was getting a little too rude acting in character, so the judge, who was an actual judge, admonished him to tone it down. The student didn't listen, so the judge took them to a little side chat and told him he really needs to stop. The student blows up at the judge and tells him that he doesn't have to listen to a petty state court judge and proceeded to verbally assault him. Judge filed an assault charge. Student was kicked out of school for damaging the school's relationship with the local courts, and I would imagine likely never got admitted to another law school, or, if they did, would have a hard time passing the character and fitness test to practice law in that state. This is a much longer story, but I'm on mobile. Anyways, a guy came into court on a pervert charge. His friend is a lawyer who comes into court with a black suit, snakeskin boots, and a bolo tie. It is glorious how slimy he looks. When he gets up to talk to the judge, he says, "I've known John for 20 years and he is a good man. He is not a pervert, sir. I should know, because I am one. I miss working for the DA. Sometimes the criminals write themselves." So at the arrest stage, when cautioned, in the UK, any response you give / anything you say under caution is recorded and given as evidence. One of these guys is arrested for a scrap and kicks off in custody, calling us effing this, C-word that. One custody officer goes, "Sir, calm down. You realize everything you say will be recorded and told to the magistrate?" He replied, "Oh, F the magistrate and the frickin' court. The magistrate is a jerk." Court day comes. I'm called to provide evidence to show that the man was badly mannered and aggressive in nature. Amongst other statements and actions he made, I say, Your Worship, whilst in custody, the defendant did not calm, and custody officers' attempts to calm him by warning him that we would provide what he says as evidence to yourself was met with, oh F the magistrate and their freaking court. The magistrate is a jerk. Well, that was the end of my evidence, and the court retired for a lunch break. The magistrates went to town on him in sentencing. I only have one. Was in court during a sentencing, and the defendant, not my client, approaches the bench with his attorney. The judge begins to go through the sentencing colloquy, and the man says, F you, judge. The judge, a female, was pretty shocked and just said, Excuse me? I said, F you, judge. Ain't no woman told me what to do in my life. Sentence me to whatever. She just sat there dumbfounded for a second. Then, all right, fine, Mr. Blank. I hereby sentence you to life in the penitentiary. Well, that just sounds freaking fantastic. Defendant was already doing a life without parole sentence and had this charge pending when he received his first sentence. He knew he was basically untouchable, and no matter what the judge did, his sentence could never get worse. 2 good stories from arguing motions. 1. I was arguing a case should be dismissed because of a decade-long delay. Sketchy opposing counsel says to me, Where's your authority to show that delay is long enough? Judge says, right here, case dismissed, and points to his file. Number 2, opposing counsel asked if I was crapping him when I said, despite a typo, the motion could still be granted. I crap you not, he cursed during oral argument. When I was a public defender, I represented a woman in felony DUI trial. It was a felony only because her license was already suspended when she got the DUI. Her BAC was .30, yes, not .03, and there were empty vodka bottles rolling around in her car. I found case law that said the state must prove she actually received notice that her license was suspended in order to charge it as a felony. On my motion after the state's case, again after the defense's case, and again after the jury verdict, the judge grudgingly had to dismiss the felony part because the state couldn't prove the woman ever received notice that her license was suspended. The judge made a very clear record, however, that the conviction for DUI was solid and unaffected by dismissing the felony. Whatever, we beat the felony, which was the difference between 4 months in prison and 24 hours in county jail. That's not the dumb part. This woman was knucking futs and swore she wasn't drunk. Bull crap, she was drunk every time I ever talked to her, and no one would dismiss her case. She filed a lawsuit against the public defender's office, my supervisor personally, me personally, the county superior court, and the judge personally. She would show up at the courthouse every day to, quote, read her file and harass the court staff. The judge eventually barred her from coming to his court without written permission. She started wearing wigs and big hats and sunglasses to skulk around his court unrecognized. No idea what happened to her after that. I swear to drunk I'm not God. We had an expert witness testifying about gunshot residue. He was asked about how long such residue would remain on a given surface. His response, before the court, well, I like to say it's like the difference between love and herpes. Herpes lasts forever. A guy was getting sentenced for stealing, and the judge asked him if he had anything to say before the sentence was passed. These are the words he chose to utter. Your Honor, if I'd known they was watching me, I never would have done it. A guy getting sued for millions for a scam car dealership purchase before retiring to the desert with the scam proceeds showed up on the first day of trial wearing a $50,000 gold watch. His lawyer saw the jury noticing the conspicuous display of wealth and got the guy to ditch the watch, which left him showing a bright white line highlighting his desert tan. The jury was then eyeing him as someone trying to hide his wealth, so to hide the tan line, he showed up on day 2 wearing a $30 Timex. I saw one of the jurors point out his own Timex to his neighbor and shake his head in disgust. Unfortunately, the jury never got to decide that case. They'd have creamed him. Once, I represented a defendant in a defamation case. The plaintiff was crazy and self-represented. He also had a bit of a language barrier and claimed to be a doctor of law in his country of origin. His sentences sounded reasonable, but in an extended conversation, it was clear he was misunderstanding longer words. He was so bad during questioning that I got about 3 different opportunities to cross-examine himself just because his story kept changing. The judge also indicated that I should leave evidence objections to him because there were so many problems with everything he did. At the trial, this man was amazing. I wish my client or I had the money to buy the transcript just for sentimental reasons. One of my favorite exchanges was where he cross-examined my client's witness, who said she had seen the plaintiff yelling at the defendant. What was I saying to her? I don't remember. But you still say I was yelling? Yes, I remembered what you were yelling, but not what words you used. So I was just screaming like this, make screaming noises at the witness, holds his hands up in the air like, got her, and smiled triumphantly at the judge. Another exchange, same trial to my client. So you say you were scared. Yes, you were very aggressive. But why were you scared? You were yelling at me and you're much taller than me. How many people have I killed? What? How many people have I killed that you know of? I don't know. So why would you be scared if you don't know that I've killed anyone? Same triumphant look at the judge. Another time he said to the judge, I didn't threaten her. Don't be silly. In my culture, if I had threatened to kill her, she would be dead. In cross-examination, I asked him whether he had seen a document that had been filed about the case in another court. I told him that the court had made it public. The judge confirmed it was a public document. The plaintiff yelled, Are you saying that you have defamed me too? I also said in closing arguments, Your Honor, it is clear in giving evidence that Mr. Plaintiff had some difficulties with English and did not understand certain words. He may have misinterpreted what my client said. He cannot be relied on for this reason alone. Plaintiff stands up and says, My English is fine. How many African languages does Mr. Rocco know? Tell me. I did the trial pro bono. I don't regret it. Cops of Reddit. What criminal actually fascinated you with their criminal skills? Continually had to interview a man who was repeatedly arrested for running guns. Sometime about my fourth interview with the guy, he explained to me that he earns about $250,000 in 3 months of smuggling them. He inevitably gets caught and was repeatedly sentenced to 9-month stints, 2 years but only served 9 months. He also told me that no one ever seized his funds. They were all done in cash and left in a, quote, safe place. So he said he had a steady job where he made $250,000 for a year's worth of work and will retire in a few more years. Plus, since it was all tax-free and he lived cost-free for his 9 months of incarceration, he was banking it all. Dude basically made my entire life's earnings in 7 or so years, but the guys arresting him thought he was an idiot. Edit, holy crap, this blew up. I'm currently at work and won't get into too much detail. This is a 100% true story and feel many don't understand that 3 strikes is a commonly misunderstood law. The defendant must have been prior sentenced to serious or violent felonies. This isn't generally, depending on the gumption of the DA, applicable. Most cases get pled out to more minor offenses in sentencing. This man never took it to the box. Unless they have done what we call the Dirty 30, they will usually be eligible for a plea if the strike is dropped. I am not a beat cop, nor was I a beat cop when I met this guy. I was not seeking any charges against him, merely a cog in the bigger wheel. We don't often catch the smart ones. They live in mansions in Bogota. We catch the low-hanging idiot fruit, but sometimes the idiot fruit can become useful. There are many dynamics to law enforcement beyond someone's mail getting stolen and domestic violence calls. I've met way more impressive people, but this guy fit the question asked. Back in an earlier part of life, when I was a cop in Baltimore's Western District, our sector had been getting hit with weird commercial burglaries that owners couldn't figure out how they were happening. Alarms weren't going off, and owners were showing up to ransack shops. We drove a lot of back alleys and walked a lot of foot for months trying to catch this guy. Eventually, one winter midnight shift, we caught up to him. He finally hit a place that had motion alarms as well as entry alarms and triggered it. It was about 3 a.m. and had been snowing lightly for a couple of hours. We got to the place in less than a minute, and the cop who took the back alley saw this dude running down the alley with about a half a block head start. He took after him, radioed, and we all started converging. By the time we all got back there and had closed off the ends of the alleys in the block, nobody could find this guy anywhere. That's okay, it was snowing. We're walking along, following tracks in the snow in the alley, and they turn into a side alley and stop at the dead end. We looked at each other confused and start shining flashlights around. My side partner says, "Mother freaking Spider-Man." We look, and he's got the guy in his light, about 15 feet up against the buildings. He had wedged himself into the corner of 2 buildings and pressed his arms/hands and legs and feet out against the 2 walls and used isometric pressure at that 90-degree angle to lift himself up and stay wedged up there, just looking down at us, like some free-climbing mountaineer. He came down and got locked up. After interviewing him, over the course of days and weeks, a bunch of us went back to old burglary locations from the past few months and found where he had gotten in through roof access points. Dude was wiry and strong as heck. Skittered up the sides of buildings in that same isometric counterpressure kind of way if he couldn't find any easier access. Not a cop, but I remember a neighbor of mine having their bike, or was it barbecue, stolen, then returned the next day, along with an apology note stating that the thief had really needed it for the night, along with several apology tickets to a local sporting event, CFL football, for the family. When they went to the game, the thief and thieves came back and robbed the house. A guy in our local jail wanted to escape. Now, our jail is pretty much escape-proof if you are behind bars, but not so much if you are a trustee bringing food into the kitchen or going to court or going to the hospital, etc. So this guy went to the hospital for a problem, and halfway from the doctor's office to the car, there was a bathroom in the hallway. He told the guards he had to go, they escort him in, he pees, then back to jail. He tells this to his girlfriend. She dresses up as a dude, goes to that same bathroom, removes the hockey puck from the urinal and drops a hacksaw blade down the drain and attaches the blade by fishing wire back to the puck. Next time he goes to the hospital, he goes to that same urinal. The guards are standing right there, but there is a urinal screen, so it looks like he is shaking out the last drop, but in fact is reeling in the blade. Back to the jail. A hacksaw blade isn't enough to get through all the steel in the jail, but it is enough to make a hole in a window where he now went into the business of reeling drugs up from the ground with the fishing line. I had a guy that was IT for a mid-sized company. He set up fake vendor accounts that went to his Google Wallet. He then would make fake invoices for the fake company for software licenses, and the company would pay a monthly subscription fee, and the guy would pocket it. He never got caught. The scam snowballed to the point if he stopped, someone would notice. So he confessed to the CEO and had minimal prison time and had to pay it back. Remember, Brenda from accounting is going to pay whatever is on her desk. Edit. IT and accounting can get together and rob you blind. Keep Brenda and Jed away from each other. I worked in the jail for a short time before working patrol, and as such, I knew quite a few of her clients. A year or two into patrol, about 10 years ago, I am walking to my car, which is parked on a city street after a call, and my keys are locked in the car. A client, who I remembered as always being rather funny, comes off his front porch, asks if I need help, and in less than 5 seconds, he had my door open in one movement. He and his friends, and I, just started laughing. I threw him a fist bump, and that was the end. Now, I have a whole kit to get into cars for emergencies like babies trapped inside. I've practiced and tried to be good with it. I've also called unknown amounts of tow trucks to help people. I've watched locksmiths work. Nobody held a candle to this guy. Side note, client really cleaned up his life and owns a small but decent mechanic shop now. It's pretty nice to see. My dad is a cop. He once had a guy run a red light at 2 a.m. The guy then stopped at the next light for about 3 minutes as it went through its cycles. My dad pulled him over and asked why he waited so long. The guy said since he ran the red light, he thought he should stop extra long at the next one. Edit. My dad also has a rule that says if you make him laugh, he won't give you a ticket. No ticket was issued that night. 2 local guys walked into Canadian Tire and just casually walked out of store with a full-size canoe. Who would ever question that bold move? Got caught when they went back in for the oars. I watched a Travel Channel program on casino thieves. One of the most successful was a sleight-of-hand guy at the roulette table. His gimmick was he'd put 2 chips on a roulette number. When he won, the dealer, spinner, I don't know, I'll just say dealer, looks at his 2 chips and says, okay, 20 times 35 is $700. No, the guy would say, and he'd flip over the top chip. It wasn't 2 $10 chips, it was a $10 chip on top of a $1,000 chip. The casino would call their pit bosses and their security team and analyze footage from a dozen different security cameras pointed at the table and the surrounding tables. All of them would show that the guy and everyone at the table never touched his chips. It was physically impossible for him to make a switch. What he did was sketchy, but it wasn't against the rules. Finally, reluctantly, they would give him his $35,350. Turns out he was switching chips. He had 2 people working with him to watch and distract the dealer and the pit boss. He was an expert at it. He would bet $1,010 every round and switch out the $1,000 chip every time he lost. He realized that casino security won't scrutinize every $20 loss. Not a cop, but I always liked this guy. Richard Lee McNair. Quote from the Wikipedia article. After McNair's arrest, he escaped 3 times from 3 different institutions using various creative methods. On his first attempt, he used lip balm to squeeze out of a pair of handcuffs. He escaped a second time by crawling through a ventilation duct. In his last escape from a federal prison in April 2006, he mailed himself out of prison in a crate. Not a cop, but look up the Banco Rio robbery in Argentina. That was some fine robbing. They enter the bank from the front door, everyone on the ground, demand the bank vault to be open. They get in and close the door. Police arrive and start to negotiate through telephone calls. Negotiation lasts for hours as they threaten to kill everyone in the bank. Police finally go in, enter the vault, and it was empty. No money, no people. An hour later, they find behind a cabinet a hole in the wall. The hole led to the sewage system that ended up straight to the river. They put a boat in the sewage and escaped through the river. They got caught because the wife of the gang leader turned him in because of a fight they had. The money never appeared. Have y'all seen that show called Money Heist? That's its English name. The Spanish name is Casa de Papel. I think this event is what inspired the show. It's about this group of criminals that all get together and rob a bank. But what sets it apart is that it goes into each person's life, and drama unfolds as tensions and relationships form between all the characters. Highly recommend if you have Netflix. I had a shoplifter hitting the Walmart for TVs. He would go into the store, put a TV in the cart, and go to customer service. He would request a refund for the television. To wit, the customer service employee told him he needed a receipt. He would proceed to get agitated to the point where security would come over and escort him and the TV back to his car. Away he would go. He took 3 local Walmarts for almost 20 TVs. Sometimes, it's the simple strategy that's the best. My coworker back in the day used to work at a bank. He would copy checks and cash them. He was almost at $1 million when his girlfriend got mad at him and snitched. He would be sitting on a bench somewhere if it wasn't for her. Lesson, people. The only people that should know of your crime are the ones you commit it with. r/unethical life pro tips. Couple of idiots tried to steal an ATM, chained it up to the back of an old 1975 Chrysler New Yorker, weren't looking, and it rolled into a convenience store front window. Left the ATM, and as the alarms for the store were going off, made off with 50+ cartons of cigarettes. Got pulled over on a highway because one of them had to pee. Not a cop, but worked with police after I was mugged. Basically, this young, really sweet-looking couple would mug or pickpocket people, go to the bank of the victim, and one of them would claim that his/her wallet had been stolen, and they had no money to get a new ID and needed ID to get a bank card. The sympathetic banker would buy the story and help them get a new debit card under the victim's account. They were super charismatic and memorized all the other information they could find from the wallet: full name, address, sometimes actual numbers from the bank card. Apparently in my case, the guy showed up with my credit card saying he had canceled it by mistake as he thought it had been in his wallet when it was stolen. The banker gave him a new credit card and a debit card for my account. This happened to me 4 years ago, and they were still going strong this year. The only reason they were caught was because I happened to be at a bank, saw them pulling this crap, and recognized them from when they mugged me. It's not the crime of the century, but at the college I was a cop at, we had a phantom pooper. Somebody would, at night, take a dump on the floor next to the toilet. And we get a call about crap on the floor and basically be like, well, I'm not cleaning it up, call a janitor. Eventually, after it happened a few times, we started paperwork on it. I have no idea why. We were never going to catch the guy, or girl. This went on for years. Not every night, not even every week, but often enough that I'd always get a chuckle out of it. Last time it happened was 3 days before my last day there, and I left satisfied that the mystery pooper was still hard at work. Edit, lovely. My most upvoted comment is about poop now. I feel like I've accomplished something today. Edit number 2. It still happens. I keep in touch with coworkers, and they still find poop every once in a while. So, it didn't stop when I left, so no, it wasn't me.
I am the one who defecates in the night. I am the grunt in your stall, the splash in your toilet, the stench in your bathroom. I am the Phantom Pooper!
Ex-deputy sheriff here. Before I attended PED Academy and was able to become a road deputy, I worked corrections. One of the smartest people in that facility I've ever dealt with was a man on the second story of the tower I'll call Inmate X. X would spend most of his days in his cell, quote, asleep. He never went out in the pod, he never brought a lot of attention to himself. He just seemed like the typical guy who made an honest mistake and wanted to sleep his time away and go home. About a month after we received X, he had to elevate the security level of another inmate in his cell. 5 bunks per cell, 20 cells per pod, because we found metal in his rack. 2 more months go by, and X now has less than 90 days left of his initial 180-day sentence. Suddenly, an alert goes off in the pod. A deputy triggered his radio for backup when he went in the pod to find all but one of the 87 inmates high off their butts, having taken acid tabs smuggled in the jail in clear wrap. After we shook the pod down and searched for more, all we found was that inmate X was the only one who hadn't taken any drugs because he was asleep. He had established a pattern of this, so we believed him. 2 days later, another alert goes up. This time, everyone but X had taken some Molly and the pod broke out in a happy dance/cuddling frenzy. 3 days after that, the court sent us over a copy of their security footage. They're across the street from the jail. As we watch the highlighted segment, we see a red coupe pull up outside the jail, a white cloth falls from the second-story window, a woman exits the car, loads the cloth, and it's hoisted back up. This absolutely blew our minds. No way could it be possible, because the windows were reinforced glass and steel mesh surrounded by bars. But as we ran up to the second story, we inspected every window, couldn't find any traces of tampering. About a week passed, then the courts called over to us, the red coupe is back, and we all rushed to the pod to finally catch X out of bed, having skillfully removed the sealant in the window in a fashion where it wouldn't break, and was using a handmade system of his underwear and some string from his blanket to hoist the drugs up through the hole. That day, we busted him with cocaine rocks. The driver of the coupe turned out to be his girlfriend, and she was arrested. Our minds were blown at how clever he was to do it the way he did, right under our noses. He was sentenced to 45 years in prison, and his girlfriend received 25 years. 45 years? When he had 90 days left? The homies just wanted to cuddle, man. I'm not a police officer, apologies, but I will say, I once briefly had a coworker who was an accomplished con man. The guy lied about everything, constantly and convincingly, and was also stealing equipment. He was in the IT department, to sell. Eventually, though, people called BS on the lies that the owner realized this wasn't just standard griping, but that the guy was serious trouble. The guy fascinated me, though. So much lying, so much effort to present false images of himself, that he had a PhD, that he was a naval aviator, that he was a scuba diver. I did a bunch of searching for him online around the time he was fired and found threads in and online BMW enthusiast groups where he ran a big scam selling parts he never delivered, then made an appearance as his own twin brother to sell the story that he himself had been shot down over Iraq and therefore couldn't deliver the parts he'd been paid for. Anyway, it was just the weirdest thing to me. People I respect who worked directly with him said he actually had the knowledge and skills to do the job he was hired for, which was, I'm sure, a pretty good paying IT gig. But instead, he half-baked it and got busy stealing equipment. He was fired, then not long after arrested and sent to prison for selling prescriptions to people in his capacity as a fake MD. I had the discussion with a good friend who also worked there at the time. I'd argue, there has to be something really weird wrong with him, right? Something off with his brain or something? A mental illness, or something with drug and alcohol abuse? While my friend would say, no, he's just a piece of crap con man. There are people who do it for a living. They're out there. Anyway, sorry for butting into your thread, but this guy still fascinates me, though from a far distance. I worked at a radio station for a while, and the news reporter listened to the police scanner constantly. She told me to come into her office and listen to this chase going down. The cops were on a high-speed chase down back roads following a car thief. This guy was taking these curves and hills at 90, and it was a 5-speed sports car. But eventually, he took a sharp curve too fast and flipped the car multiple times into a field. He got out of the car completely unharmed and fled, stole another truck at a farm, and drove it close to his home, walked to his house, and went to bed. The police were shocked at how good of a driver he was, being that he was only 17. He was arrested, and in his mugshot, he had his collar popped up and this smirk on his face like, I'm so freaking cool right now. I know what he did was wrong, and he could have killed himself or someone else, but that mugshot will always stay with me. If he doesn't go into NASCAR, I'll be disappointed. Mall in my old neighborhood was under renovations. Thieves built a facade and placed it over the night deposit slot for the bank with the sign, sorry for the inconvenience, temporary night deposit. Every store except one put the day's cash in it, plus other businesses in the area put their cash in. Thieves came back late at night, took the facade and sign, plus the money, and disappeared into the night. They were never caught, and estimates of the amount of cash were well over $100,000. Not a cop, but a friend of mine was in jail with an actual jewel thief. Apparently, before the actual robbery, he would case the place as a potential customer looking for an engagement ring for his made-up fiancée, put a hidden camera somewhere in the store aimed at the security pad, and then leave. Over the next 3 to 7 days, he would determine the schedule of the employees and the security code to turn off the alarm. Once he was confident he had an accurate idea of both, he would go back shortly before closing, put a down payment on a ring or put it on layaway, and then spend some time talking to the employee and using some impressive sleight of hand to get the key to the jewelry case off of their keyring without them noticing. Once he had that key, he was ready. The following morning, around 3 hours before opening, he would go back to the store, pick the front lock, and then put in the security code to turn off the alarm. Then he would open the jewelry cases with the key he had snagged for the employee, take all the jewelry he could, and walk out. The only reason he was caught was because the manager of the last store he tried to rob was in the middle of a divorce and sleeping in his car in the parking lot, so he saw it happening and called the cops. The cops connected him to the other robberies and told him he could tell them where his stash was and get 8 years or do a full 16. He chose the 16 years. He has millions in jewelry stashed away, so once he is out, he's set if he can make a clean getaway. Reddit. What's your best, no time to explain, let's go story? I'll start. Happened back when I was 16 to 17. Was hanging late one night at an out-of-the-way basketball court with 3 of my very attractive female friends. We were just shooting some hoops and talking when someone suggested a game of strip basketball. The 3 girls wanted to be on a team together, so they told me I could go choose anyone I wanted for my second. Naturally, I bolted for my high school's basketball team captain's house, pounded on his door at 10 p.m., sweating and out of breath, and said, "No time to explain, let's go." I didn't know him very well, and he had no reason to go with me, but we were both happy he did. The girls weren't happy with my choice, but they kept their word, and we got a nice show. Your turn. A few years back, my brother pulled up to my house with a paintball gun and told me to get in. He hands me the gun and says, "You'll know when to shoot." We go on a short drive to a corner where some kids began to egg his truck. I knew when to shoot. My archaeology crew and I were stuck in La Paz, Bolivia because of civil unrest that cut the roads leading to our dig site. We had been hanging out in La Paz for 2 weeks, trying to stay as warm as possible and waiting for any opening in the demonstrations. The Bolivian army fired into a crowd, killing several demonstrators, and both sides called a truce for 24 hours. That morning, our professor ran into our rented apartment and yelled for us to grab all our gear. We have 5 minutes to leave. We had no idea what was going on. The prof took the next combi, and my poor Spanish skills meant I couldn't ask questions of my fellow passengers. We boarded one of the first combis out of La Paz and headed out to the Altiplano. On the road, we passed huge roadblocks, burning tires, piles of broken glass, and various debris with just enough room for a small car to make it through. We made it far enough to hike the remaining 12 hours to the site next day, and then we started digging. Went to a bar with some friends and my parents in my hometown for my 21st birthday. Turns into a good 6 hours of drinking. Went to the bathroom, and while closing the lid after finishing, the entire bottom of the bowl shatters. I was legally drunk for my first time at said bar, and proceeded to urge very loudly that we needed to leave. "No, I don't think you understand. I destroyed a toilet. Let's go." A group of bigots named Homosex is Sin visit Georgia Tech about every year to tell everyone why gays will burn in hell, women engineers are witches, blah blah blah. When I saw they were in front of the student center, I ran back to my place to find my camera and stereo. My friend was passed out right next to both items, still hungover from the night previous. I shook him and said, "Put on the smallest boxers you own and follow me." This is what happened. What follows is a link to a video where the 2 men are dancing in their smallest boxers in front of the bigots, set to techno music as a crowd cheers them on. Godspeed, you beautiful people. When I was 8, my parents took me over to their friend's house for an early dinner party. They had a daughter my age who was also my friend. She was really into animals and nature, so she wanted me to go with her about a block down her street to investigate a bird's nest she saw earlier in a tree. We go, she starts climbing while I'm on the ground watching. Then, about half a block away, this hippie-looking surfer dude with long blonde hair and wearing nothing but shorts walks out of his house and notices us. I notice him for about 2 seconds and then look back up in the tree at my friend. Next, I hear a loud whistle, and when I look back in the direction of the surfer dude, he has his shorts down around his ankles with his willy whacker out in all its glory. I yell, "Run!" My friend is clueless, but somehow she manages to jump out of the tree and we run back to her house as fast as our pint-sized legs will carry us. Luckily, my dad and her dad were right inside, and when I yelled, "There's a naked man chasing us," they were outside almost immediately. They find the surfer dude standing right in front of their driveway. I remember my dad saying, "Hey man, are you pulling your pants down in front of children?" And the guy responding with something like, "Screw you, man," and then walking away. The amazing thing is that we called the cops and they came over to file a report, but they recommended not pressing charges because the guy knew where we lived and might seek revenge. This was back in the mid-1970s. Hurricane Charlie was going to do a normal ride out the storm situation and play video games and eat junk food all weekend while it rained outside. I got a call from a buddy who said the hurricane just turned 90 degrees and made landfall in Sanibel, like 20 to 25 miles away. I rushed into my roommate's room and said, "Grab 2 days worth of clothes. We're getting the heck out of here." When we came back to the house, it had been destroyed. The roof leaked and held water in the ceiling until it completely caved in, completely destroying everything we had in there. Not sure if this counts, but I was in high school and espied a hot girl waiting for the bus. Being me and knowing I would just awkward all over myself if I tried things the normal way, I got on my best panicked face, ran up to her, and said, "Quick, quick, there's no time, I need your phone number." She blurted it out. I actually kept it in my head until I could get it down on paper and called her that night. We've been together for 13 years. I own a skate shop, and it was also a popular hangout for skater kids. I was off one day, and I get a call from an ecstatic skate kid that sounded in panic saying, "Get to the shop now!" Click. I rushed down there 2 minutes later. Anthony Kiedis walks into the shop. One of the kids had run into him in town and convinced him to come into the shop. All the skater kids are in my shop behind the counter with my employee, pretending to work on things, put skateboards together, etc. It was hilarious to see them try to act naturally, and we all got to have a good conversation with Anthony Kiedis about skating, paddleboarding, and kiteboarding. He signed a girl's skate deck for our Wall of Fame that I still have. He's been back every year since then and is a regular customer. This past summer, I delivered paddleboards out to his vacation home. For the uninformed like I was before I read this post, Anthony Kiedis is the lead singer of Red Hot Chili Peppers. And now, it's time for a pheasant tangent. Got a phone call from my sister one evening, and when I picked up the phone, she was clearly running and out of breath. I could just make out her saying, "Open the front door," before the line went dead. So I ran to the front door, picking up the heaviest thing I could find along the way. It was a climbing helmet. Wrenched the door open and moved out the way just in time to see her bolting into the house past me. I slammed the door and waited for her to catch her breath. There was a giant pheasant chasing me all the way from Tesco. "Don't worry, ma'am. I've got this." With that, I donned the climbing helmet and told her to call the police if I wasn't back in 5 minutes. When I was a kid, my village had an evil jerk of a pheasant that would chase old ladies down the street. You could look out of the window and it would be strutting around the village square waiting for a pensioner to attack. Anyway, one day I was out in the garden with my dad, who was plucking a dead pheasant, and this devil bird jumped up onto the high fence and looked at us. I'm not kidding when I say it had the craziest look in its eye. I asked my dad to use my water pistol to blast it, so he pumped it to full power and shot the pheasant in the chest. This crazy bird just gripped the fence for the entire time it was being savaged by the jet of water from my Super Soaker 2000. It didn't fall off, and only flew off of its own accord about 10 minutes later. Then a day later I saw it dead in the road. When I was about 13, my buddy and I rode our bikes to the local Kmart to be bored, obnoxious teenagers. Real quick, this story is from 11 years ago, so oh my god, I feel old now. Anyway, tossed some Nerf footballs over the aisles, ran around, mocked things. Then I thought it would be funny to spray my buddy with the perfume sample. He didn't think it was funny at all and started chasing me. I ran and hid, and the hunt was on. Using his finest ninja skills, he snuck around until he saw me, crouched down in the hardware aisle. He crept up behind me, put his butt right next to my head, and let rip. He turned around to gloat and it wasn't me. Just some poor schmuck looking at hammers. The next thing I know, he runs by me. We gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go. I was in high school, and my friend came running up to me and said, "No time to explain. I need your shoes." I spent the rest of the day walking around the school in socks and some makeshift shoes made out of a cardboard box. I later found out that the reason why my friend needed my shoes was so that he could participate in his chem lab class and not fail due to his not wearing shoes. Me and my friend are heading to Sonic for lunch. Suddenly he screams, "Pull over!" pointing across the road and across 2 lanes of traffic. Why? No time to explain. Go! So I hit the gas and barely avoid getting creamed. Across the way, I see what he noticed first, a man holding down a woman in the dirt near the ditch beside the road and striking her. We start to get out, he sees us, lets her go, and gets in his car. A moment later, another car pulls up and some older women swarm over the struck woman as he begins to drive away. We hop in our car and give chase. I hand him my phone, he calls the cops. We end up leading the way on a car chase with officers slowly assembling en masse behind us. Finally, we chase him to a house and block the driveway with our car as he gets out and runs behind the house. Knowing we have no right to chase, we let the police take it from there, but we checked the car. It had kids in it. The police interviewed us later, told us that the kids belonged to the woman, and if we hadn't followed the man, they might not have found the car. Felt like big heroes. Best part was, on the way home, we helped the fellow with the broken radiator, and in the middle of getting him taken care of, the police called us after they caught him, and I got to say this awesome line. "Bro, that was Officer X. They need us down at the station." Broken radiator guy was all, "Who are you?" My brother is 11 years older than me and stayed with my dad with my parents divorced, so I never really got to live with him when we were young. When I was about 14, he barged into my room at 4 a.m. and told me to pack your crap for 4 days. Our flight leaves in 2 hours. Soon after, I was on a plane. Turns out he had planned us a trip to Colorado to go snowboarding and told no one but my mom 1 hour before he told me. My dad working in the World Trade Center heard a huge crash several floors above him. Boss looks at him and says, "No time. Let's go." He lived. About 11 or 12 years ago, I was taking my dog for a walk in the forest behind the local elementary school. He seemed all anxious to get off leash, so I unleash him since I figure he wants to run around and pee on everything. The moment I let him off leash, he starts barking at me. In hindsight, my best guess is what he was trying to convey was, "No time to explain, let's go." And then he bolts. I'm ticked off and start chasing after him, but he was fast, even by dog standards. Turns out on the other side of the woods, there was a middle-aged guy who had exposed himself to a group of young girls. They ran away screaming, and he was trying to make a grab for one of them. It was at this moment that my dog came bursting out of the woods like Lassie or Rin Tin Tin or some crap. My dog was popular among the kids, so they knew him. They screamed his name and ran towards him. The pedo bailed, with his Johnson still hanging out of his pants. I was fully prepared to reprimand my dog for being a jerk. Then I found out what happened. He got steak for dinner. Freshman year in college at a school in Boston. Sick as a dog. Newfound ROTC friend with similar taste as myself comes running into my room and tells me he needs me. I tell him I'm sick and can't go anywhere. He refuses my denial and forces me to come with him. Flash forward 45 minutes in a car, and we are arriving at Gillette Stadium. Turns out there is a Halo 3 tournament being held for Army recruitment purposes. He is very aware of my Halo skills due to the sleepless nights we spent when Halo 3 first came out. Ended up placing second, and along the way beating Jared Mayo. He was physically upset and said he wanted to kill me. Felt awesome to beat a professional football player at something. All of this occurred in the box seating of an empty stadium, which we have an amazing view of. So surreal. Army recruitment via Halo 3? Are we fighting the Flood? Is Area 51 home to the Flood?
Wake up, sheeple! The government is hiding aliens under our freaking noses!
My wife and I went to Scandinavia in the winter for our honeymoon. First Copenhagen, then Helsinki, then northern Finland. Yes, this is an odd choice. Our flight got diverted, and en route to Copenhagen, our luggage, including all of our winter gear, was lost, and the airline was unable to locate it for the 4 days we were in Copenhagen. However, we made friends with one of the customer service agents at the airport. We returned to the airport on the day of our flight to Helsinki, still with no luggage, and dreading the Arctic cold we were about to fly into. Temperatures were in the single digits in Finland, but unable to do anything about it. Magically, we found our luggage at the airport that morning and went through security to our gate. It was about half an hour before boarding when our friend from customer service on the other side of the airport ran out to us and said, "Follow me and don't ask any questions. We don't have much time and there is something I must do for you." Then he led us through a series of back hallways in the airport to his office. "What I'm about to tell you, you must tell no one else," he said. "In 20 minutes, our pilots are going to announce a strike, and all our flights will be grounded." This was in no way public knowledge. He put us on another flight to Helsinki with a different airline, and we watched in gratitude and amazement from the Finnair terminal as the strike was announced, and our original flight, along with every single other SAS flight leaving Copenhagen, was grounded. Epilogue: we found ourselves in Copenhagen again a year later, and we went to the airport specifically to try and find our friend and thank him, but it was his day off. I'd ask Reddit to pass on my thanks, but I'm pretty sure what he did was against company policy, and I wouldn't want to get him in trouble for doing a good deed for a young couple. I was at a house party over the summer that started going a bit south, so my friend and I decided to just get in the car and drive home. We got to the car and were waiting for the third guy in our group when a very, very drunk guy came up with his red Solo cup of beer. We were friendly to him, asked him what he was drinking and all. He decided the best reaction to this was to throw the beer at me while I sat in the car. After this happened, I noticed a group of about 7 or 8 more drunk people ambling towards the car. They did not look happy. My friend decided the best response to this was to go to the back of his car, grab his shotgun and 2 shells. Oh crap. He stood next to his car with the drunk people slowly approaching and yelled at them once, "Get away from my car," while loading the shells. They did not stop. He fired once into the air away from them, cocked the gun, and said again, "Get away from my car." About a third of them left after that, so he fired once more and the rest scattered. He had just fired a gun at a house party. Twice. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Our friend then came out of the house screaming. No time to explain, let's go. We never went back to that house. TLDR, nearly drunken brawl broken up by shotgun. Walking home from playing football in the park, and my dad, aggressively speeding down the road in his car, brakes hard next to me. He looks angry as heck, and my little brother is crying, and he sternly says, "Get in." I roll with it, and he speeds around the park looking attentively out the window. My little brother points at a group of lads, maybe 16 to 17 years old. One of them is running with my little brother's glasses. He's only about 10 years old. My dad jumps out of the car, rugby tackling the lad to the floor. My dad is huge, and the lads look petrified. My dad absolutely bawls at them for about 5 minutes, and after that, he gets back in the car, and then we go to McDonald's. Dads out there listening to this right now, if you aren't willing to body slam someone for your kid, what are you doing with your life? I was at a sporting event with some friends. Wow, it was 10 years ago. Now I feel old. The bleachers were metal benches on concrete and set up amphitheater style, going down a hill and all the concessions and bathrooms on the top of the hill behind us. It's about halftime and I'm thirsty. I also see that it's starting to cloud up. I tell my friends I'm gonna go grab a drink and be right back. I walk to the top of the stairs and I see the biggest, nastiest thundercloud I have ever seen, and it's about to crap bricks right on top of us. I hauled it down the stairs, grab the friend closest to the aisle and yell, "We gotta go." It takes a second for it to register, but everyone grabs the important stuff and then follows me up the stairs, across the food court, and into the bathroom. Suddenly, the temperature drops by at least 10 degrees. The wind gusts. The last friend in almost lost her hat. Seconds later, we hear a huge clang on the tin roof of the bathroom. And then another, and then another. Then out the door, we see golf ball to orange-sized hail everywhere. TLDR, I saved my friends from being caught in bleachers in a nasty hailstorm. It was the middle of the night on a road trip with a friend. She's a city mouse, I'm country. I was driving, she was sleeping, and I started to get sleepy. So I pulled off the highway onto a barely paved road and followed it for a while until I found a wide shoulder to pull off. I parked and we got out so she could have a cigarette. There were loads of stars and we leaned against the car having one of those hushed middle-of-the-night conversations. Then, I heard rustling in the woods 8 feet from us. At first I ignored it, but then I realized there was a pattern. I'd hear it at the 10 position, then at 2, then back to 10. It was more than one thing making the rustling noise, and they were getting closer. And I realized something was hunting us. So I put on my power voice and told her, "Get in the car." Her eyes got wide and she hopped in really quick. I jumped in and we took off back to the highway. She turned to me and asked, "Was it an axe murderer or something?" I told her no, it was probably wolves. And she got mad at me for scaring her. She didn't see how wild animals stalking us could possibly be dangerous. Doing some bodywork on a Cessna 350 when my buddy comes running into the shop with his eyes nearly bugging out of his head. Goldfish, come on, follow me. What is it? I'm busy. Just come here. I have to finish this work. Is it important? Just follow me. It's important. I'm not going unless you tell me what it is first. Cake! Turns out it was somebody's birthday at work and there was free cake in the break room. If somebody could take that cake soundbite and turn it into Space Core from Portal, I would love you forever. So, I had a job driving a taxi, night shift. I'm waiting in the cab lineup from my next fare when a native Indian stumbles up to my taxi, asks me if I want to buy some beer. No thanks, pal. You sure? I'll sell you a case for $15. Keep in mind, I'm in Canada, and a case will normally cost around $40. I say sure, and he hops in and tells me to drive around the corner to the golf course. I'm skeptical, but I go for it. We arrive, and he runs into some bushes and comes out with a 24-pack of beer. I laugh, pay him, and ask if there's more. Yeah, if you buy 10, I'll sell them to you for $10 each. I gave him $190 more. He runs towards the bushes, looks back at me, and yells, "Well, you gonna come help me with them or what?" I follow him to the bushes, and there is a skid full of cases of beer. We take 19 more and load them into the back of my taxi van. I get the nice gentleman's phone number for next time, and we say our goodbyes. Fast forward 15 minutes. I've driven home. It's 3 a.m. I was living in a house in a row of townhomes. Neighbors surely hear me pull up, open and slam my door. I run in, wake up my roommate, and yell, "No time to explain, let's go." He rushes downstairs, puts on shoes, and follows me back to the cab. I open the rear doors and his jaw drops. "Where did you find this?" "No time to explain," I respond. So, here we are, my half-naked friend and I running 20 cases of beer from the street to my house at 3 a.m. I am amazed that no neighbors had awoken and looked out their windows and called the phone number on the van. When we finished and I had time to explain, my roommate gave me $200 and we went and got another 20 cases, this time from a skid hidden behind some trees at a park on a local lake. TLDR, bought 20 cases of beer from an Indian, woke up roommate at 3 a.m. to help rush it into our house. We built a wall between our kitchen and living room with cases of said beer. Just saw a mother walk into a classroom with a handheld radiation meter and proceed to tell the teacher that little Billy needs to sit in the back corner of the classroom because of the toxic school Wi-Fi radiation. What other insane things have you seen/heard of that these helicopter moms do? Joke's on her when I tell her that visible light is also quote-unquote toxic radiation. Maybe she'll go back to whatever cave she crawled out of, this time with their lights turned out. What I don't get here is that mom was perfectly happy with other children getting killed by the supposedly lethal radiation. Surely, if she was so confident it was toxic, she would have nobly saved the whole class by getting them out of there. But I guess she believes Wi-Fi is toxic, so logic should not be expected. I work in HR at a large telecommunications company. We usually sit in the conference room and can see/hear the interview candidates while they are waiting in the lobby. This poor guy was probably 19 or 20, and his mother wanted to go into the interview with him. We actually had to ask her to wait outside the lobby because even after being asked to sit down, she said it was her, quote, right to be in there. WTF? Guy didn't end up getting the job, and she later called and asked where she could send an appeal letter. Wish I had saved that letter. It was intense. I made a really great friend in high school. He and I were as thick as thieves. Early on in the friendship, my parents took us to a movie. I don't remember the movie, but the start of it got delayed by technical difficulties by about 20 minutes. My parents called from their cell to let my friend's mother know, but only got the voicemail. Thinking that would suffice, we all proceeded to have a good time. Fast forward to the end of the movie, my mom turns her cell phone on and discovers her voicemail box is suddenly full. 20, I believe, was her limit. All of them were my friend's mother calling, pleading for us to return her son, and she would pay any amount we demanded, and that if we called back soon, she wouldn't go to the police. She literally had thought we kidnapped him. Suffice to say, when we got home only 20 minutes later than planned, the conversation was rather awkward. My dad figured out exactly how long it took to walk home from school. As in, literally walked it himself, and then gave me exactly that long to get home every day. If I was more than 5 minutes late, I got a beating for, quote, screwing around. Then they got mad that I had no friends, and after a protracted argument and fight, I got an extra 15 minutes to make friends after school. That winter, I got in a snowball fight and was having fun and didn't realize I'd gone a little too long. So dear old dad drove to my school and started wandering around, bellowing my name until he found me. That was a blast. I believe this is the year after he stood in front of my entire class and told them to start being nice to me. I'm so glad I change schools every year. That sucks. I know the feeling though. My friends almost never wanted to come to my house, and I pretty much blame it on my folks. My dad was just an embarrassment, blew up on me for having friends over once, and told me I couldn't have anyone in the house unless I asked. This was in front of my friends, whom I had known for years and whom were also let in my house by my mother right before she went to work. Then there were 2 instances where I asked if some friends could spend the night, got what was basically a yes, and then they ended up having to leave because my mother said that since she didn't talk to their parents, again, the first instance where people I had known for years, it would be considered kidnapping. Then the second time, my dad barged into the room, screamed at me, and called my friends bums to their faces, telling them they had to leave. Needless to say, I didn't have many visitors over, and my social life was almost non-existent. There was a girl in my 5th grade class whose mother would take an hour out of her day to come supervise recess. Every 5 minutes, she'd blow a whistle and go, "Emmy, it's time for your shade break." And, just like clockwork, Emmy would have to go sit in the shade for 5 minutes. This crap got really annoying when we would play team sports. No one wanted Emmy on their team. Went to a play group for children with special needs involved with infant development. Talked to a mom after I noticed that she wouldn't let her son off the mat he was playing on, chit-chatting, all the while she was stopping her kid from going off the mat. When I said something along the lines of, "Wow, your son really wants off that mat," she replied deadpan with, "Well, he was a preemie, so I got to protect him from the world." My daughter is blind, has albinism and nystagmus. She was rolling, yelping, and climbing up everything like a spider monkey. Ugh. When I worked at a coffee shop with the most helium-like, whiny freaking voice imaginable, came and ordered a 7-step customized drink and threw a fit when we just asked her to repeat it.
"Oh no! Am I the bad guy? I'm sorry! I thought you'd be able to speak English!"
Then she goes, in the same whiny, begging voice,
"Can my son have a job?"
I hand her a job application.
"He already sent one in! Can you just hire him? Hey! I don't want whipped cream on that!" "So, can he have a job?"
I tell her if he's sent an application, he'll get a call when the manager looks through the stack. We had like 20 applications at any given point.
So he's just gonna be one in the pile? Yeah, that's not gonna work. He's a great kid. Just freaking hire him.
Just to get rid of her, I wrote down her son's name and say I'll look into it. I hand her her drink and she leaves. My manager, who heard her screeching voice from the back room, immediately calls me over to see that kid's name. He digs through the pile of applications and immediately shreds the kid's application. His only words, "If we hire him, his mother is going to be here all the time." I once interviewed someone for an entry-level job. The next day, I got a follow-up call from his mother. This kid had not made the cut. He didn't interview confidently and didn't enunciate very well. Not good for a call center job. But I hadn't passed that on to HR yet. I told this woman a little white lie though. I informed her that he had been in the running, but since he can't be counted on to do his own follow-up, he's clearly not the kind of employee I want. When I was in high school, I would go teach French to elementary school children with a few friends of mine. I used to do magic tricks for the kids because they would go absolutely ape and they all loved it. One day I was teaching them and I told them I had a special trick. I did the Balducci levitation for them and they went ballistic. Afterwards, the teacher pulls me aside and sternly tells me I'm lucky she didn't throw me out of the classroom because one of the students who happened to be absent that day is, and I quote, anti-Wiccan and isn't allowed to view, quote, black magic. Had a helicopter mom who became one of the middle school's lunch monitors in order to help her kid make more friends. She would carry around candy and would only give it out to people that were friends of her child, literally denying others if she didn't know them. Ah yes, bribery to make friends. That's surely a good way to show your kids. You haven't seen anything until you've seen helicopter hockey parents. They don't only hover over their kids, they encourage horrible sportsmanship. A few years ago, when my goalie brother was playing Squirt AA, so about age 9 to 10, the opposing team equipped themselves with the age-old strategy of run the goalie. The coaches were in on this. The parents cheered bloodthirstily whenever these little jerks ran into my brother, and they kept this up more than they attempted to score. My brother had had enough. Poor kid snapped and walloped the next boy who skidded into his crease, the net area, which was totally justifiable by that point. This redneck-looking woman and her husband immediately got up, started screeching about their poor precious Joey, and get that goalie out of there, ref. Eventually, their whole cheering system was on their feet and yelling out obscene stuff about taking my brother out, to 10-year-olds. They all got escorted out by security. You cannot make this crap up. I have a cousin who lives in northern Michigan where youth hockey is a very big deal. My cousin was voted president of the league one year, and his first priority was to get the parents to only encourage good sportsmanship and friendly competition. He sent out over a dozen letters before the season even started to the parents of players throughout the league, stating that any parents seen shouting profanity, encouraging violence, or cheating, etc., would be permanently banned from all future games. The first round of the season starts, and it was a disaster. Parents were worse than usual, and several people were arrested at different games for fighting in the stands. Needless to say, the letters hadn't worked. So, my cousin decides to hold a meeting for players and coaches only to discuss the problem. After having the police forcibly vacate a few parents who didn't agree with the quote, players and coaches only aspect of the meeting, he asked the players what they wanted to do. Most of the players actually said they didn't want their parents to come to games. Most of them weren't trying to go pro. They just enjoyed playing hockey and their parents were ruining it for them. So, they took a vote at the meeting and my cousin sent out one last letter that simply said parents/step-parents/foster parents/legal guardians, etc. were no longer allowed at official league games. If a parent was spotted, that team would forfeit the game. If they came a second time, that team forfeit the season. My cousin got some death threats, but nothing ever came of it. We decided to teach the Hunger Games in English last year. I had a few parents raise concerns because they had heard a few rumors, but it was nothing a quick conference and a little reassuring couldn't fix. Until Mrs. Bickerstaff happened. Now, Mrs. Bickerstaff had an inflated sense of self-importance to begin with. A housewife who, with complete seriousness, signs her emails Mrs. Nolanda Charlene Bickerstaff Esquire type of self-important. She not only pitched the biggest of fits about not allowing her son to read it, we offered an alternative to kids whose parents put their foot down and said no, but embarked on a 6-month campaign to get the school shut down unless we pulled the book from curriculum for everyone. She disenrolled her son, threatened to sue us for the cost of sending him to an expensive private school, and called every parent in the school to try to get them to do the same. When she didn't have any success with that, she went to the local news and told them what was going on. What resulted was a flattering news story that reported our high test scores and innovative approach to learning. We're a charter school. I should mention that she didn't read the book. Alrighty, I have a few. I worked at Whole Foods, and that is ground zero for lunatic parents. Number 1. There was the, quote, nutritionist and her mom that didn't want anything scanned because of the, quote, radiation. Number 2. One lady was going on and on about how her son was corn-free, egg-free, dairy-free, and soy-free because that's what her chiropractor told her to do. I wanted to apologize to that kid so bad. Number 3. When I worked at a cooking store, like Williams-Sonoma, I had a lady come in with her tween-age kids trying to find glass baking dishes because, quote, metal is bad for you. I suggested silicone, and she said that was worse. So I suggested parchment paper, but she already used that. I had a hard time holding back the massive smile when I told her that parchment has silicone in it. Every time she would go off on something, her kids would just roll their eyes. Didn't see it personally, but a few years ago there was an article in my local newspaper about a mother cleaning the vegetables she was cooking for her family in bleach. Didn't realize she was doing anything wrong until one of her children nearly died. I was not allowed to walk to school by myself even though it was literally 1 block away from my house because my mom said I would get forced upon. I was in junior high. I was never allowed to be unattended and was not allowed to go to friends' houses because my parents did not trust other parents. This extended all the way through high school until I started, quote, acting out, and they sent me to a lockdown mental health treatment facility. My childhood was painfully lonely, to say the least. I was volunteering for this thing 2 years ago where we helped freshmen haul their stuff, mostly tampons and televisions, into the dorms. One mom came at the end of the day and flipped her lid because her daughter's roommates already divided up the space, she was last to get there, and, oh yes, because her daughter didn't get the dorm with the swimming pool. Yes, her daughter had to change dorms because it was too dang hard to walk to the 2 buildings in a 50-foot radius to use the swimming pool. Her daughter was really chill though. Let's hope she stays that way. Pro tip for younger Redditors, if you're going to bring your parents with you into an admissions interview for a graduate program, it won't hurt your chances of getting in, but it will make you the laughingstock of the admissions department for the day. My brother is an admissions counselor at a major American university for one of their graduate schools. He told me that it's not an uncommon thing these days for helicopter parents to attend their children's admissions interviews with them. These are people in their 20s taking their parents with them to admissions interviews for graduate school. My jaw dropped when I heard this. We know them as umbrella parents because they cover you from everything. Poncho parents are more extreme. They're the parents that won't allow computer access without them right there, put huge restrictions on TV, G or PG, kids like 16, won't allow any video games, etc. Anyways, a poncho parent I know managed to keep her 16-year-old son under the delusion that girls are gross and have cooties. My cousin has a helicopter mom, very controlling and dominant. Kate never got to think for herself, never had to learn discipline, financial or personal. She never had to. Her mom did it all for her. When Kate finally got into university and was away from her mother for the first time in her life, Kate went completely off the rails, since to all extents she was an 18-year-old with the maturity of an 8-year-old. She would struggle to fill out basic paperwork and forms for the class, since she'd had no experience of it. Worst of all was that she had no experience of the opposite sex, since she'd been sheltered all her life, and so she got taken advantage of frequently. What was even more stupid was that her mom still to this day does not see where she went wrong. She can't realize or admit that she weakened her child by removing life opportunities that strengthen a personality. In high school, I was friends with this girl we'll call Judy. Judy's mom was really strict/overprotective, and she could never go anywhere with us. And when she did, she'd inevitably end up grounded. She could never hang out, and she wasn't allowed to have friends over very often. Once when I was at her house, she got grounded for yelling at the dog. This led to a rebellion where Judy just stopped doing anything her mom told her. She started drinking heavily whenever she could, and she also smoked weed and did whatever pills or drugs people had. She always had to babysit her if she came out with us. This went on for a few months, and she met this guy. We'll call him Tom. He was about 25, and the kind of dude that's every parent's worst fear. Judy came from a good upper-middle-class family. Her dad was a dentist, that sort of thing. Tom was a 25-year-old burnout, and he was on house arrest when Judy met him. It was love at first sight for her, even though we all tried to talk her out of it. She started hanging out at Tom's house anytime she could. She'd skip school to go over there, sneak out of the house at night, that sort of thing. Well, it's no surprise what happened next. Judy got pregnant. She was 8 months along at our high school graduation and married Tom and had the baby shortly thereafter. Moral of the story, don't be a ridiculously strict parent because your child will rebel and bad things will happen. P.S. The same exact thing happened to Judy's sisters when they got older. Sad stuff. Edited to update. Judy and Tom stayed married for 10 plus years. I don't keep up with her, but from what I've heard, she went on to become a hairdresser. Tom stayed out of trouble and the kid turned out okay. He'll be 20 now. Dang, that makes me feel kinda old. I had a friend, Christina, whose mom was like that but more crazy. She had divorced parents who split custody pretty evenly. When she was with her dad, things were good, but when she was with her mother, if her mother ever saw her talking to a boy, even a male cashier at a store, she was grounded. She wasn't allowed to have friends over, and she wasn't allowed to go out anywhere besides school without her mom. Even when she was staying with her father, she would get called at least once an hour. Needless to say, she rebelled. Girl was a notorious nympho and a bit of an exhibitionist. She would flash cars, make out with anyone at the drop of a hat, and pleasure her boyfriends in public spaces. I refused to go to a movie theater with her because of how she would defile the place. Thankfully, she was smart enough to use protection and wasn't interested in drugs. Hilariously, when her mother met me, she decided on the spot that I wasn't allowed to be her friend because I was such a bad influence. Apart from my looks at the time, I was a poser punk/goth/whatever girl. I was perfect. I didn't do drugs, had decent grades, I was the only one of our friends involved with church and volunteering, and I was waiting for marriage before giving up my V-card. This woman met me at a school event, and because I was wearing a hoodie during the summer, she accused me of being a cutter and drug dealer in front of my own mother, and then proceeded to shame my mother for allowing me to have a boyfriend. My mom even felt sorry for her daughter. Yeah, this goes without saying, but you can't prepare your child for the world if you're their only world. Kids are gonna screw up, act out, argue with you, all that stuff. That doesn't make them bad people and need a constant supervision. If anything, that makes it worse because you're judging their every move. Paranoia is contagious. Instead, learn to accommodate their needs, but talk with them about what they want. Now, if they want to do hard drugs, that's probably not going to end well, but you can be a parent without being a bodyguard. I wish I had seen this thread earlier, but here goes. I'm a preschool teacher for ages 3 to 4 years old. One day, one of my girls, fake name Abby, is playing with, fake name, Becky's security blanket during free time. Becky wants her blanket back, so she asks Abby to get off. Abby refuses, so Becky pulls the blanket from under her and Abby cries. I tell Abby that she needs to listen to what Becky is saying and respect her friend's belongings. I also tell Becky that next time, instead of pulling the blanket from under Abby, she should just come tell a teacher. Maybe 5 minutes later, while I'm passing out snacks, Abby flips into a crazy rage and runs towards Becky, tackles her, and takes a huge bite out of her shoe. Plastic literally came off. I pull Abby off and try as calmly as I can to ask her why the heck she attacked Becky. Basically, it was revenge for getting her in trouble and taking the blanket away from her. Now, here's the mother part. I write an incident report telling both parents what happened, and, of course, I put Abby in the thinking chair for such an outrageous attack and call her mom, leaving a message and whatnot. But the next day, Abby's mom comes in and finds the child that got bitten, Becky, and tells her that if she hadn't yanked the blanket out from under Abby, maybe she wouldn't have attacked you. Of course, I asked the parent to leave immediately and to not speak to the children, that Abby was the one who attacked out of spite, and that her child's reaction was not an appropriate one that could be excused in my classroom. The mom got so mad at me for defending Becky, a 3-year-old, that she reported me to my supervisor for being unprofessional. I still had my job, but mom withdrew her child. But seriously? Generally calm people of Reddit, what made you lose your absolute mind that time? It always felt like my parents never wanted me. I was a surprise honeymoon baby born 9 months and a day after their wedding. I was regularly screamed at for anything I did until I just started hiding. I was called, quote, the practice child my whole life. My younger siblings got way more love and attention, etc. In my teens, they started taking in, quote, strays. If any neighborhood kids didn't want to go home, they could just be at our house all the time. Effectively, my mother would take my friends away from me to be her friends instead, one of which was a kid who picked on me constantly from the time I was 11. I guess they had that in common. That guy was kicked out of his dad's house and his mom's house when he was 20, so my parents took him in permanently. That killed me. But I always wanted their approval, so I was always calm and agreeable, always desperately trying to figure out how to get them to love me, so I went along with it. Years later, I'm married and have a son. This guy still lives with my parents. They continue to coddle and make excuses for him while criticizing me for whatever they feel like. One day, we're all at my parents' house and my son is being a goofy 2-year-old, which annoys the man-child living there. So he gets furious, picks my son up by his ankle, and spanks him. My parents claim not to have seen it. We went home. I couldn't sleep that night because I was so upset. The next morning, I made sure the guy and my mom would be at home, and why wouldn't he be there? And I went to confront them with my wife. I dumped everything I had been putting up with on them for about an hour, including asking how my mom could allow this jerk to hit my son. She maintained that it didn't happen, so I went through the roof. I ended up crying because of all the pent-up emotion, so my fantastic wife took over. She said we wouldn't be coming back if the guy still lived there, so he yelled that he would move out and he stormed off after saying he didn't have to listen to this. My parents convinced him not to move out shortly after we left. My mother expressed how disappointed she was that I didn't come, quote, to have a conversation and only came to, quote, dump on them. That was her big takeaway from everything I said, that I wasn't being fair to them. We went to counseling with them later. For months. It validated everything I had felt, but they never stopped lying and being defensive. One counselor said we should be on Dr. Phil. The other counselor said my mom is, quote, incapable of empathy. Both counselors called my parents delusional, but of course, my parents didn't take any of that seriously. At one point, my dad asked me, who does he think he is to judge us like that? As if he forgot that's their job. Haven't spoken with them in almost a year, and life is so much better. My brother and I played travel sports for a few seasons as kids. One trip, I was at the pool with some of his teammates messing around in the water, and the coach's kid was being a jerk as usual. My brother was one of the smaller kids on his team, so the coach's son would screw with him a lot. Most of the kids on my brother's team disliked him, but didn't speak up so they wouldn't be next. He thought it would be funny to pick up my brother's drink right in front of him and spit into it. My dad taught me from a young age not to let anyone screw with my brother or sister, so I got seriously angry. I took a good running start and shoulder-checked him into the pool. Since he had just gotten there, he hadn't taken his clothes off yet and cried because his phone and iPod got ruined. He literally ran out yelling, "I'm telling my dad!" Well, that backfired because everyone stuck up for my brother, and the coach was not happy to find out what a crap bird his son was being, so he was the only one to get in any trouble. Sometimes justice is a dish best served cold, and other times it's served extremely wet. Ruined iPod and all. My grandfather passed away, so I told my boss that I had to take a couple of days off to be with my family. He had the nerve to tell me work was more important than family and threatened to fire me. I went off on him in the middle of the office for a solid 5 minutes before quitting and rushing home. This lady came to the shelter to see the cats. She asked if she could give them treats, and I said yes. It's a shelter where most of the cats are free. So she gets the bag out, the cats are going wild with anticipation, and she just stood there, laughing and tempting them without giving them anything. She looked like she enjoyed their anxiety, and her laugh sounded like a crazy person. I lost it, grabbed the bag out of her hands, gave treats to the cats, and asked her to leave. Those cats are already stressed out. Don't give them more anxiety. I can remember that day like it was yesterday. I was home packing my stuff to get ready for when my husband was out of basic training. I never yell or even raise my voice to hardly anyone ever. My dad has always had a wicked temper, and my sister also had a knack for starting yelling matches with him. One night, she forgot to do something she was supposed to, and the yelling started again. I ignored it up until he called her stupid. It got under my skin, so I spoke up a little saying that he shouldn't call her that. He hollered back, "You are my daughters. I can talk to you however I want." That's when I snapped. I saw red for the first time in my life, and I completely lost it. I screamed back at him at how I was tired of him treating us like garbage when he lost his temper, at how we hid in the back room with my mom until he cooled off, and how all I wanted was to visit my family before I had to move over 12 hours away from them. I also threatened that if he ever wanted to see me again, then he needed to shut up and sit in the corner until he was done throwing a fit. I yelled at him for the first time in my life for a solid 30 minutes. I didn't stop until everything I had to say built over the years was out, and I saw him go from red-faced angry to what seemed to be guilt-ridden. When I finally stopped, he was quiet. He didn't say a word and walked away. Shortly after I moved out, he went to a doctor and has been put on some medication to help with his anger issues. Now, he's super friendly, and I haven't heard him throw a tantrum like he used to in over 10 years now. He has never spoken poorly to me or my sister since then either. I lost my mind when my patient got her pre-authorization for surgery for a large grapefruit-sized pelvic mass denied by BCBS, and when I did a peer-to-peer, the doctor working for the insurance company said I needed to have a psychiatrist rule out mental causes of her pain first. I had to walk away for 30 minutes before seeing another patient because, had anyone given me any more lip, I might have gotten violent. I lost my mind when I was late for work because my colleague asked me to cover their shift and gave me the wrong time, and it was my fault from the company's perspective. This happened in some club ages ago. I was bouncing around on the dance floor with everybody else and apparently stepped on some dude's foot who had been standing there with this posse of 2 or 3 other guys watching people. I shrugged and apologized, then turned around to leave. Right then, quote, somebody smacked me in the back of the head. Not hard, but too hard to ignore. I turned around still calm and said something like, "Look, I'm gonna walk this way, you guys stay here and nothing more needs to happen." Turned around again, got smacked in the head again. I was very much ticked off at that point. It didn't help that they looked at me all innocent. I couldn't even tell which one of them did it. So I just stuck my finger in the face of the dude whose foot I allegedly stepped on and recommended he don't do that again. Turned around once more, waiting to get smacked in the head again. This time, they poured a glass of beer in my back. That's when I completely lost my mind. Threw myself around and went straight at the guy. I was in full rage mode, didn't care what happened next as long as that guy suffered. I could tell by the terrified look on his face he realized he had gone too far. His friends never stepped in to help him. After a while, people separated us and that was that. I have no sympathy at all for people who resort to violence for solving their problems, but feel no shame for having snapped in that situation. I think I did everything in my power to avoid what eventually happened. So, earlier this year, my health insurance got messed up. I started making too much money to qualify for my state's Medicare, so healthcare.gov requested a notification from NJ Family Care to confirm I wasn't on it anymore. So in January, I called them to get said notification. They say, yeah, you should get it in a couple of weeks. It never comes. Unfortunately, I had forgotten about it until healthcare.gov sends me a message that they're going to raise my insurance costs if I don't get them the message in the next 2 weeks. So I call NJ Family Care again and explain to them the situation. They once again claim they're going to send me the notice and don't. So now, after getting an extension from healthcare.gov about this, I call up NJ Family Care once more and attempt to explain the situation, politely requesting the cancellation notice. But the woman on the phone gets an attitude with me, saying some stupid stuff like, you know this is the cancellation department, right? And I lost my mind. What is your problem? I don't understand why you can't just send me this stupid letter. What's happening over there? Just look in the file and cancel it. Yes, you dog. I know this is the cancellation department. I want a notice that it's canceled. I must have scared the crap out of her because the next thing she said was, I'll go get my supervisor, who solved the problem in 10 minutes, and I got my cancellation notice 3 days later. My friend is bad with math. I was explaining a thing once. It took 10 minutes. He tells me he doesn't get it. So I sit there and explain this thing more deeply. Took 30 minutes. He's like, takes in-ear headphones out of ear. He was covering it with his hand. Oh, sorry, I wasn't listening to you. Found this amazing radio recently. I lost my mind. I worked at a diner with an open kitchen. You can see us, and we can see you. I'm the only cook during the lunch rush when I hear a lady shout, "Hey!" I look over and a lady sitting in a booth points at me and then does a very condescending come here motion with her finger. I thought something was wrong with her food, so I decide I could run out of the kitchen, leaving 4 orders on the grill, and see what I need to fix. She has no food on her table. She holds her blue soda cup out to me and asks, "What is this?" Excuse me? Why is my root beer in a soda cup and not a mug? I don't know, I'm just the cook. Oh great, another freaking idiot in this freaking place who doesn't know anything. She then proceeds to chew me out because I, the cook, do not know why the server gave her root beer in a cup. We have special root beer mugs, but the servers couldn't find them. Someone misplaced them. I apologize and head back into the kitchen while she's loudly talking crap about me to the next booth to find out that all of my orders are ruined and more have been coming in. It's already stressful working in a kitchen, and that was the last straw. I went in back, started screaming and kicking the crap out of the walk-in cooler. When I went back out, everyone was quiet and avoided eye contact, even the lady with the issues. Still looked pretty mad though. I rushed through the orders and thank God she left without saying anything. I didn't get in trouble though, since my manager was serving and had to deal with her as well. He understood. My friend, who is usually a chill person, had some girl make fun of her brother who was killed, and she ended up beating the crap out of her, smashing her face into the wall and getting kicked out of our school for it. Deserved. I was in charge of a rollover trainer once at a military training site. Think of a Humvee on an axle that spins, like a rollover accident. Part of the safety brief before anyone goes in is to empty their pockets of all items. Take any items on belts off. We have rubber items inside to simulate stuff flying. We do this for safety's sake. Part of the training is, we stop the trainer on its side/roof so the participants can get exposure to assisting the other passengers and exit the vehicle safely and quickly. It's been a long, boring as crap day, and like all good army training, I am hungover and irritated. All officers, and they are listening for crap. We stop the exercise on the roof for a group, and they all exit except one who can't undo the seatbelt. I open the door and reach in, and placed my hand on a dual-edge 4-inch boot knife. I absolutely lost my mind. I saw red, my ears burned, and I distinctly remember seeing one of the other instructors mouth, "Oh crap." I chewed out every freaking officer there, all of whom outranked me, many of whom outranked my commander. Didn't matter, as my position was safety officer. I went on a tirade. I turn around after it was done, and my best friend is freaking recording it on his phone. That jerk showed that clip the rest of the week and for years after him. I miss that sucker every day. Update, sadly, that video is long gone, I imagine. Yes, I am former military, gladly retired. My son was maybe 8 months old and had recently been diagnosed as profoundly deaf. Deaf kids will often inhale to make vibrations and noise that they can somewhat, quote, hear for stimulation. We were on pins and needles as I had just lost my job, and our insurance and the cochlear implant surgery was going to cost us $170,000. We'd have to sell the house and one of the cars. We needed a break, and our in-laws took us to the food court at a local mall. Our boy started to inhale and gasp. "He needs a beating," a fat 20-something said, not so quietly to our friends at the table next to us. I rarely curse in public and am generally non-confrontational, but a stream of insulting profanity issued from my mouth for a good 10 minutes that would have put a sailor to shame. I found it couldn't stop, and I got on the verge of Bukowskian poetry. I insulted her, her mother, her weight, and her pinched-face friends. I launched into the smell of her genitalia, how fat she was, how she'd only be able to reproduce with a blind drunk moron with a death wish, as she was uglier than the devil's butthole on fire with the crap of heck. And it only progressed from there. F. Lee Ermey's Marine Drill Sergeant from Full Metal Jacket would have told me to tone it down a bit. I told her he was deaf and that we couldn't stop it, and this was a goddamn food court in a crappy southern town filled with crappy inbred, hellspawn, redneck, ignorant mutant troglodytes that embarrassed normal troglodytes. The food court was silent, and all the eyes were upon us. And then it progressed from there. She got up and left crying. I can honestly say the whole rant was involuntary, like a pus-filled boil popping and draining in a torrent. I had never done anything like this before and have not done it since. I feel bad for her to this day. My 7th freaking trip to the DMV when trying to reinstate my license. Every single time, they scrutinized my paperwork and always managed to find something wrong and would send me away to fix it. On this 7th trip, they finally resorted to, "You have no proof that you ever had a license," despite my piles of paperwork showing my driving record, among other things. I refused to lead the seat and said, "You people are monsters." A manager was called. We argued. He said he believed that I had had a license, but there was just no proof, and he couldn't risk accepting my paperwork in case someone checked it. I said I refused to lead the seat until I knew exactly what was needed. Manager said, "Tell you what, I can contact last state I lived in and can get a verification that I had had a license there. It would take 3 minutes. That's when I yelled in the DMV, "Why wasn't that the first thing you said?" Anyway, I got my license back. I grew up on a farm, and one day, several cows decided that since their head could fit through a small hole in a gate, then their whole body could fit through a small hole in a gate. This resulted in a broken gate, a cow stuck in the broken gate, several cows roaming freely in a field after escaping through the broken gate, and me absolutely losing my mind. I now work in IT. Cows are dumb. Username Recovering Farmer checks out. In 6th grade, a group of some 4 kids took monopoly of the back of the bus, a true power move. I always minded my own business and tried to sit away from them. For one, they all didn't understand basic hygiene and smelled even though they were older than me. Anyway, turns out the bus driver was their quiet retired grandpa who would never tell them to stop bullying or doing dumb crap. So one time, they have a freaking spitting war. As in, they spit across the seats at each other as they jump seats for cover. At one point, I was the seat in the middle, and a giant wad of their disgusting spit hit me square in my face. I then proceeded to take my Pearson history book, one of those big, heavy, hardcover textbooks, and smash them over the head with it. Granted, this was me telling them to stop their nonsense several times. The spitting stopped after that. Anyway, the book cover cracked and I had to pay for it at the end of the year, but I regret nothing. This guy at work was, quote, cleaning out the work break room. Basically, he was throwing out people's personal belongings. So, I see my new coffee mug I bought specifically for work in the trash and lost my mind. I started yelling at him that what he was doing was morally wrong and it's not his stuff to throw out. I went to my HR manager and complained to him about the principle of the thing. I took all the coffee mugs in the trash out and washed them. The good thing is, if you are a calm person 99% of the time, people are more likely to listen to you in the 1% of moments you lose it. Exactly. I used to waitress and never caused any drama. I was there to make money for my wedding. I showed up on time, didn't take smoke breaks, never on my phone, and rolled with the punches. The two best compliments of my life came from my manager. One was him thanking me for not making him know my fiance's name. I never had problems to deal with at work like the other girls, and I didn't chit-chat. And when all heck was breaking loose, he called me his calm little Hindu calf, which still makes me laugh. Anyway, this jerk of a cook wouldn't stop calling me pet names and trying to touch me. Every time I said loudly and clearly, "Don't touch me," and "My name isn't Sweetheart, it's Hopeful Kitty." Everyone knew how I felt, and they tried to tell me, "That's just how he is, let it go." I told them that the way I am is that I don't want him to touch me. When the manager talked to him, he'd stop for a few weeks, then start again. After months of this, I told the manager if it didn't stop, I was going to file a harassment complaint. Manager talked to the owner and asked if he'd rather have the cook or me because I was on the verge of quitting, and they agreed they'd rather have me 100 times over this dude. He was gone by the next day, and I got an escort to my car every night. Turns out, if you are drama-free and calm, people really listen when you have a problem. I lost it on a nurse in a nursing home once in my fire/EMS days. We ran a call there at 8 a.m., and she said she had just got there and didn't know anything about the patient or their condition. Alright, plausible enough. Run there again at 11 a.m., same nurse, same story. Okay, fine, maybe you haven't had enough time to actually catch up on your patients. We're annoyed at this point, but keeping our crap to ourselves. 1:30 p.m. rolls around, and we get another call to the same place. Same nurse. Exact same response as the first two times. I lost my cool and started yelling at her in the hallway outside the patient's room. I was livid. How have you been here for at minimum 5.5 hours and still don't have any info on any other patient? It was absolutely unacceptable, and I let her know that in no uncertain terms. She called my chief and I got yelled at for verbally harassing a nurse. 3 months later, we get a call to the same place for an 85-year-old woman with an altered mental status. We get there, it's the same nurse. Yet again, same bullcrap answer that she didn't know the status, but stated that a tech had checked in on the woman 15 minutes ago. We go in the room and this woman is dead. Like, dead. Full rigor, emptied bowels, the works. We tell her this and she panics and runs in and starts CPR. We're like, no, she dead. Obvious signs of death and there is no working this patient. She was fired the next day. Bug exterminators of Reddit. What was your "we're gonna need a bigger boat" moment? Spent the summer between high school and college working for a local, family-run exterminating company. Nice gig. Residential treatments during the day, mosquito fogging at night, and the occasional dairy farm treated for flies and rats. One day, I'm at one of these dairy farms and enter the milking parlor to spray and set up traps. See a rather large cat across the parlor from the front door. Good for him, I think, growing fat, eating rodents and whatever else he's caught over the years. I enter the parlor and the cat moves, and I realize the cat is not a cat, but a rat. Easily the size of a 12 to 15 pound feline and running down a drainage pipe. Decided that I did not want to be a sacrifice to the Rat King that day and noped out of there fast.
Rats, where the rats?
I'm not an exterminator, but that didn't stop my aunt from asking me and my brother from taking care of a hornet's nest. I figured that I could handle it. Heard somewhere that WD-40 supposedly kills hornets, so one night we go over with a can of spray foam and a half-dozen cans of WD-40. It was quiet, so I quickly spray the entrance shut with the foam and we go to town on it with the WD. That's when we heard an unholy and frankly terrifying sound come from the nest. We should have ran, but we kept spraying. However, the hornets were not going without a fight. They somehow tore open another entrance and poured out. That's when we started running. Luckily, I parked my car close by and had the doors open, but I had a couple dozen stings, as did my brother. 2 out of 10 would not try it again. That said, the hornets did abandon the nest, and a couple of days later when the swelling went down, we went back, cut the branch down, and lit the nest on fire. It went up in a puff of flame and smoke, so that was fun. But never again am I going up against hornets without calling an exterminator first. I developed a phobia of wasps in the last couple of weeks. I deal with industrial batteries for forklifts, order pickers, stuff like that. We had a 3-day job down in Eugene where we basically had to just pressure wash a crapload of batteries. The customer had to set up outside underneath this metal overhang, during the hottest week in Oregon history, mind you, so that sucked as well. There were nests all along the underside of the overhang, and their occupants were less than thrilled with our presence there. On the 3rd day, we were finally wrapping up, and there were a few older batteries that we needed to prep for shipping because the customer was getting rid of them. One of them was on a busted pallet, so we needed to move it to another one. To do this, you take a strap with 2 hooks on it and hook it to either side of the battery. Well, I go to hook it up, and when I put the hook into the lifting eye of the battery, a crapload of wasps flew out of it and attacked me. I say this with no pride whatsoever. There is no manly way to run away from a swarm of angry wasps. I frolicked out of there as fast as my butt could frolic. Then, I grabbed a broom and used it to open up the lid of this battery, at which point I find the wasps have built a gigantic nest inside the battery. The lid is maybe 3 feet long, probably 10 inches across. These suckers built up all along the bottom of it. They were hanging out inside the battery cells where all the acid and lead and fun stuff is. So yeah, we didn't ship that one. Not dealing with mutant acid-soaked wasps. Pulled back insulation in a crawl space to track termite damage. About 100 plus baby/juvenile cottonmouths came out from where the dryer vent wasn't hooked up properly, keeping them nice and warm and moist in the insulation as fall approached. I'm only a termite exterminator. Got out that crawl space quicker than lightning. To this day, I'm sure the termites and snakes are living under there happily ever after. Got called out to a house that had a roach problem. So, I walk in the house, and I crap you not, you could barely see the color of the walls and ceiling for all the roaches. It was literally raining roaches from the ceiling. The people inside just sitting around, like it's a normal Monday, and laughing about catching roaches falling from the ceiling. Without a doubt, the most disgusting thing I've encountered. Edit. Forgot to mention, I opened the cabinets and I'll never forget seeing the hundreds of thousands going across their pots and pans.
It's raining roach! Hallelujah! It's raining roaches!
I worked at a gas station on overnights and asked my manager to do something about the spider infestation. I hate spiders, and it was so bad customers started going to other places because these big spiders would build webs over the door in the span of 40 minutes between customers, plus the entire awning and overhang was just a mess of webs and hanging spider nests. So she goes out and buys some spray, and it barely does anything. So she goes and buys a bunch of spray and is standing outside one day just spraying the awnings and overhang, the doors, air pump, etc. Anyways, there was this large crack in the siding, so she stuck the spray nozzle inside and started spraying. I'd have died. What followed was so bad, I probably would have died from terror. The way she described it, after the screaming stopped and the color came back, was as if someone turned a great big faucet on. Hundreds of spiders just came pouring out like water. Must have been a ton of nests inside there. Not an exterminator. Get used to hearing that, by the way. Screw it, since we're all just sharing our worst anyway. My apartment's got an indoor trash chute under the kitchen sink. It has a habit of falling open by itself, and pests crawl up and into our house from it. Roaches, the works. We've been fighting them for weeks. Eventually, 17-year-old me comes up with the brilliant plan of doing a seal. I use trash bags and some strong tape to make an airtight seal around the offending chute. I do 3 layers of magic. The barrier works. The roaches couldn't cross into our realm from theirs. 3 years later, we start finding small dead roaches in the kitchen, maybe one in the toilet. I've forgotten all about the dark forces I banished years ago, and I'm mystified. The bodies start getting bigger as the weeks pass. Eventually, we start finding live specimens, and they're pretty large. I finally twig that perhaps the ancient seal has been breached. I get on down to the compartment under the sink and open it up. Horror. The roaches had slowly bitten through the seals and ended up breeding within the layers of the seal. Eventually, they got through the final seal, and as the breach grew wider, larger and more vicious bugs got through. I could see them roiling and seething in a bunch within the plastic. I realized what a huge mistake I made all those years ago, and now the evil was back for me. I ended up bringing in some industrial-strength pesticide and fighting through the outer guard to get to the breach. I couldn't let any survivors past me or would get into the house. I pushed a tube into the breach and made a temporary seal around it with more tape and let loose with the pesticide. I could hear the roaches scrambling in the plastic, getting more hectic as they started to die. Fighting continued as I was still rounding up survivors who escaped and putting them down while the pesticide did its work. Once I heard nothing from the seal, I tore it down. It was carnage, beyond disgusting. That motivated us to tear that crap out and get a new roach-proof chute installed. And I got an idea for a fantasy setting for my creative work. We have a problem with Japanese beetles. Like, a big one. I bought a trap after seeing 10 or 20 hanging out on my roses. But then, the trap was completely full within an hour. We're talking thousands of beetles caught in just an hour. So I go to investigate. Surely they didn't all come from my roses, right? So I start checking my trees, a few here and there until I get to this crepe myrtle at the very edge of the yard. It was literally covered in beetles, as in the beetles were screwing. Hundreds of thousands of beetles. My dad decided the best thing to do was to shake the tree and scare them off. That was the worst idea. Beetles rained from the heavens. The sky was dark and swirling with beetles. They covered me, even though I had retreated to a safe distance, sticking in my hair, crawling in my clothes. Dad stopped, dropped, and rolled. As these beetles were stirred into action, so were all of the beetles from all of the trees beyond. It was Armageddon. I was not convinced I would survive this. A few days later, Dad, dressed in a makeshift hazmat suit, went out and doused every tree with the most toxic bug killer he could find. Even now, weeks later, we have to pick the stiff corpses of beetles out of our dog's fur whenever he comes inside. I still have nightmares. Screw Japanese beetles. I'm not an exterminator, but I do bee removals for a living. The most honey I pulled out of a house was about 250 pounds. That's about 21 gallons of honey. I had to leave halfway through to go to Home Depot because I only had 3 to 5 gallon buckets with me. People sometimes try and kill hives with Raid. While it may be effective in some cases, no one is going to call me when it works. In other cases, it backfires spectacularly. For most of her life, the queen is fat to lay eggs. She can fly, but only short distances. So sometimes, when you spray a hive, you'll annoy the bees enough for them to abandon the hive and try to start a new one, but the queen is too fat, so they'll only move to another spot in the same house. The workers at the old hive will raise a new queen, and now you have 2 hives. I removed 7 different hives at the same house because the guy never caught on to what he was doing and kept spraying the bees. Not an exterminator, but this happened to a friend of mine in college. He was in a frat and actually lived in the frat house. During one of the parties they threw, a water pipe was broken. They didn't stop the party or really even act like it happened, so there was just water all over the place. Eventually, they just shut off the water, but didn't call any kind of plumber/cleaner for the water that was probably an inch deep on the floor. Instead, they set up little stepping stones to make it out of the front door without getting in water. However, because there was so much stagnant water just sitting around, mosquitoes were breeding like crazy. I crap you not, you couldn't be in the house for more than 5 minutes without getting 50 mosquito bites. The worst place I've ever been. They were eventually kicked out of the house when the frat advisor saw what happened, called the landlord, and the landlord had seen what happened. My husband and his first wife had a spider infestation in their backyard one summer. It started with spiders in their cedar hedges, a few. They knew they were in trouble when the entire hedge turned white from the webs. My husband goes to the hardware store and gets some malathion, dons a hazmat suit, and goes outside to start spraying. As he sprays, the cedars start to shake, the entire 6-foot-high hedge is shaking, spiders start dropping on him, and he drops the malathion and runs. A week later, all the grass is now white too. He calls 2 different exterminators who say F this, but also tell him to call the Ministry of Natural Resources. Resource officer comes out, looks, explains what the spiders are, I don't recall the species but they were big, and apparently the eggs can lay in gestation for decades, waiting for exactly the right environment. Apparently, they like to lay nests in wood. Being the Ministry of Natural Resources, they don't offer to kill the spiders naturally. He is out of options and has to wait until the frost kills all of these suckers. In Canada, frost comes usually October-ish, so frost comes, never has he been so thrilled to greet a Canadian winter. Next spring, he calls his buddy, kind of a roughneck, to help him dismantle the wood shed in the back of the yard, which is assumed to be the nesting grounds. As my husband and his then-wife cower inside, they watch out the kitchen door as Buddy tears down to the shed to burn at his farm. The shed's rafters are covered in what looks like pillows, clouds, foam. All the rafters are positively bathed in spider eggs. Buddy dismantles the shed, puts it in his trailer, and takes all of the wood and the nest to the farm for cremation. Buddy also has a terrific time going up to the window and taunting them with the rafters. As an epilogue, just when they think this nightmare is over, one spring day they have a nice bath, and as they get out of the tub, there is a large spider, the same species, on the outside of the tub. He crushes it with a CD case. It's so large, it made a crunch. That must have been the last one, as they never returned. Freaking horror show. TLDR, entire backyard is bathed in spiders, no help available, have to wait for winter to kill them off. Turns out the old wooden shed was the breeding ground. Beekeeper, but most of us are somehow in the wasp removal business too. Mentor thought he saw a small hornet's nest and took about the precautions of making a dainty wasp trap out of vinegar in an old Sprite bottle. Upon realizing the hellacious magnitude of these little suckers, he filled an outdoor vac with dishwater, set the hose under his gutter, and set the thing to suck. He's already emptied out 3 gallons of hornets. Bye, buttholes. Not a bug exterminator, but the first apartment I ever got after college I now refer to as Crap Hole. There were lots of off things about Crap Hole, like how people like to break my apartment's windows, or how, upon move-in, the dishwasher turned out to be just for show and inoperable. Crap Hole was street level. The basement level, which I discovered via a crawl space door hanging open into the alleyway that led to the washer/dryer area, was filled with abandoned construction supplies, to the brim. As in, old paint and wood and screws toppling out of the crawl space. I knew it was a cesspool. I knew pests probably lived there. I figured raccoons, and decided to get on the lookout for a new apartment. The day of move out, the day I need to pack all my stuff, I'm showering in the 2x2 foot shower stall, and something touches my feet. It's red, with long crooked antenna, but it's small. Just as I kick it off, 3 more appear. Baby German cockroaches have hatched in the drain of my shower stall. They're crawling up through the drain and onto my feet, up my legs, up the walls. Within seconds, they're everywhere. I ran out of the bathroom, still wet and soapy, and slammed the door. Nope, this is Crap Hole, and no door fits its frame. The cockroaches come bursting out through the crack underneath it. I rush to the bedroom, shampoo in my hair, my body wetting the whole floor behind me, and shake my boyfriend awake. Before I can even tell him what's happening, there's a meow, meow down the hall. My cat had been in the bathroom while I showered. Crap. I run back, will myself to open the bathroom door, where roaches are still scampering under the cracks and desperate mew mew sounds are emanating. I open it. The roaches are climbing the mirror, they're in the shower curtain. I find my cat, a baby roach on his side, one in his whiskers, and flick them off, grabbing him and carrying him outside. So there we sat, outside our apartment, the 3 of us trying to figure out what to do at this point. All we want is to get out of Crap Hole, and now every item we own is infested. Now, no matter what we do, Crap Hole will follow us, and it'll screw not just us, but our new neighbors, our new neighborhood too. We Googled it. We put everything we owned in an XXL black double-thick garbage bag meant for yard work from Home Depot. We filled each bag with pesticide. We moved the bags to our new apartment and let them sit out on the patio for 2 days. We slept on wood floors. We bought all new groceries. We bought 2 new towels. 2 days pass. We open the bags and nothing moves. We wash all the clothes/linens. I haven't seen a cockroach since. But F that apartment. F you, Crap Hole. May you burn to the ground. Obligatory, I'm not an exterminator, but my dad and stepmom held their wedding at our house. They wanted something small, close family and close friends only. Basically, like an average get-together with cake and a ceremony. They got Italian food catered, and it was overall an amazing time. Fast forward to maybe 2 or 3 days after, I was cleaning up the last of the mess from the party, and I go to take the garbage out. There are a handful of flies around the garbage, but I think nothing of it because, well, it is trash after all. I had 2 bags of garbage in my hands, so I kinda have to kick the garbage can open. I kick it open, it flings open, and there is a sea of maggots. We're talking in the tens of thousands at the very least, maybe hundreds. I couldn't see any garbage beneath them. I had kicked it open with such force that many of them had flung out and onto me. I was wearing Old Navy flip-flops and oversized basketball shorts. Some actually flew up the leg of my pants from the kick and onto my bare feet. I dropped everything and screamed as loud as I've ever screamed before. I went into the driveway to dry heave, shake out my shorts, and I even started crying a bit. I have an incredible fear of maggots, and this experience had made it 10 times as horrible to me. My dad and stepmom got home from a movie as I was having my little meltdown in the driveway. He asked what was wrong, and I told him. He went to go see for himself. I heard a scream, and he ran back to the garage. I went inside to cool down a bit. He came back in 15 minutes visibly shaken. I asked him what he ended up doing, and he said, "I just went to the garbage, got all the wasp, ant, spider, and snake-killing chemicals as I could, opened up the garbage with my eyes closed, and unloaded every single can." What had happened was that we had so much meat left over from the catering order, chicken parmesan, Italian sausage, etc., that we had to throw it all away, in the garbage. This was during July in Texas, so the meat had been rotting in the dry 103-degree heat for an entire day or two. Hey, just so people are aware, if you ever end up with that much food left over, call up your nearest shelter of any kind and ask them if you can donate it. No wasted food, no maggots. Finally, an exterminator story. Walked into a house for a roach startup. The walls moved. They were in the dressers, beds, closets, furniture, not to mention common areas like the kitchen and baths. Heck, they were in the walls. The place was an old, run-down, 5,000 plus square feet nightmare that I had to clear out single-handedly. 3 months of weekly 2-hour services, and I got things under control. Then the rat problem started. I wasn't too heartbroken when the service was canceled for non-payment. Went to an old woman's trailer for a routine pest control job. Spray the outside, put some granular down, simple stuff. Then she comes out of the house and exclaims she has roaches. Never been to the house before, was just covering for a coworker. So I go in and immediately I smell German roach infestation. So I look around and see all of these glue boards with 50 to 100 roaches on them. Pull out the fridge, and there has to be at least 300 on the walls. I turn and look at this old lady and say, "Ma'am, how long have you had these?" She told me she has had them for 3 years, so I go around looking for the rest of the house, and I'll list a few things I found. A back porch filled with cat food and cat poop. Very heavy termite damage in her roof. I ask her how long she's had the termites, and she responds, "Since I moved in." And I ask her, "How long ago did you move in?" She replies, 22 years ago. The house is a death trap. And a family of possums living in the corner of the house. I told her we need to fumigate the house. It will kill the roaches and termites in one go, and she told me she is treating the termites herself with some crap she bought at Walmart. I told her I will come back to treat the house with my manager. Flash forward a week, and me and my manager spent 2 hours at the place, spraying and getting every crack and crevice we can. I'm still treating that house, and it's been 5 months. On a side note, the old lady obviously had dementia. She would go, "Oh," whenever I would tell her about basic hygienic living. I'm going back again next week, and if she hasn't changed, I'm ending her service with us, and she can live in that house and rot. Edit, I'll make an anonymous tip for the lady. What's the most insane coincidence you've experienced? Here before the comments are filled with, "That's not real, that didn't happen." I'm just reading what's on the thread, man. Cut me some slack. I was once mugged by 4 guys on one of the main shopping streets of Nairobi, Kenya. One of the guys had me in a chokehold, and just before I was about to pass out, they dropped me and ran. At the time, I didn't know why. 12 months later, sitting on a beach on an island in Thailand, I meet a British couple who did business in Kenya, and we start to talk about how dangerous it was getting for foreigners. They described an incident the year before of turning a corner and seeing a white guy being mugged and a shopkeeper who rescued him by hitting one of them over the head with a bat. They were in the street on the same day at the exact same time I was there. It was me who they witnessed being mugged. What are the odds of randomly meeting up on a beach in Thailand a year later? I live in Australia, and I have for almost my whole life, but I was born in Dubai. Every weekend in Dubai, my mom would take me to the Hilton Beach Club and sit me in front of the pastry chef and eat. We moved away from Dubai really early on, so I don't even remember much. Fast forward to 17 years of age, a new kid at school had just moved from a nearby town. We became friends, and we both loved cricket, and we practiced a lot together. My dad and I were giving him a lift home after we were practicing, and Dad asks, "Where were you born?" And he says, "Dubai." And the conversation continues, and I say I was too, etc. Then he says, "My parents used to be the pastry chefs at the Hilton Beach Club." And this blew me away. Here we were, 16 years later, halfway across the world, and every weekend I sat in front of his parents and ate what they made for me. To this day, I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I mean, what are the chances? A few years ago, I got into a cab heading out for the evening in downtown Toronto. Shortly after being dropped off, I realized I left my phone in the cab. I tried calling it with no luck. I called the cab company, but because I had flagged the cab and paid cash, they had no real way of knowing which cab I was in. I figured the phone was as good as done and went about my night. Many hours later, and having moved around the city quite a bit, I am ready to call it a night, so flag another cab. Sitting in the back seat, I start to think the driver looks familiar and realize that I'm in the same cab I took earlier. He hasn't found a phone, but I start looking anyways, and sure enough, there it is, jammed in the seat. Me and my flip phone were happily reunited, only for me to put it in a washing machine 2 days later.
Wop, 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 wop.
I have a similar story. I was going to a My Chemical Romance and Blink-182 concert back in college. I went with a couple of friends, and we got a hotel nearby Jiffy Lube Live in order to get plastered. I got some Wendy's on the way to the concert to eat in the parking lot beforehand, but left it in the taxi. I was drunkenly devastated. After the concert, we hail a cab and I get in, feel a brown paper bag at my feet, and look down. That beautiful ginger on the bag was smiling up at my inebriated eyes as if to say, "I knew you'd come back." An American friend of mine by the name of Tom took his family on vacation to check out Antarctica. He met an Australian guy named Paul on Christmas Day in Antarctica. They didn't exchange contact info. A year later, Christmas Day, they take their vacation to Machu Picchu. He's looking down at a map when he hears, "Hey Tom, how the heck are ya?" It was Paul, taking his family on their annual trip as well. Never could explain this payphone incident. Saturday night out with friends, we decided to call my friend Al to see if he wants to join us. This was in England long before mobile phones, so we had to use one of the iconic red phone booths. Someone was already using it, so we had to wait a few minutes. Guy leaves and we cram in the booth. Now, in those days, in order to make a call, you would first get a dial tone, then call the number. When the person answered, you would hear a bunch of beeps, at which point you insert the coins. So I pick up the phone, but hear no dial tone. I hang the phone up and try again. Still no dial tone. Seems to be still connected to the previous call. I say hello to see if anyone is still on the line. Person answers, "Hello?" It was my friend Al. He had just picked up his phone to make a call, and somehow, miraculously, without even dialing his number, we were connected. We all went to the pub after and tried to figure out how the heck this happened, but it remains a mystery. If I did not have my friends with me at the time as witnesses, I would have believed it was my mind playing tricks on me. In 2004, I was 18 and on a 3-week tour of Europe. I was at the Louvre and had just experienced the cluster that was the Mona Lisa exhibit. After looking at it for 2 minutes, I started to wander around aimlessly. As I was walking, an older couple asked if I knew how to get to the Mona Lisa exhibit. I told them yes, and because I'm horrible with directions, I'd be happy to walk them there myself. They were really nice and very appreciative that I was taking the time to help them. They asked me where I was from, US in Nashville, but I mentioned my parents were immigrants from Italy. They told me they were from Portugal on anniversary. We talked a bit more, told them my name, and they were really excited about it since I shared the same name as their grandchild. Anyways, we get to the exhibit, and I go to part ways and shake their hands, but get pulled in for 2 massive hugs and a kiss on the cheek. They give me their address and say anytime I'm in Portugal to stop by and I'll have a place to stay and eat. We take a group photo and leave. 7 years later, I'm in Munich for Oktoberfest. I'm standing outside my hotel waiting for my friends when an older couple asks if I know how to get to the fairgrounds. Again, I'm crap with directions, so since I'm headed there, I tell them they could just follow me and my friends. Again, we start talking about where we all are from. Now, I have a memory like an elephant, and once they mention they're from Portugal, I start to think maybe these are the same people. I ask them if they have grandkids, and they say they have 6. I ask if one of their names is History of a Man. They look at each other sort of surprised and say yes. They ask, how do I know that? And tell them that I had met them 7 years prior in Paris at the Louvre. The old lady gets really happy and starts crying and starts to hug me. They say they remember me now and asked why I never came to visit, that they had our picture in a frame on their wall and always wondered what happened to the nice American boy. We spent the next 3 hours drinking beers and catching up. Luckily, we got there early, so we were able to get an empty table, and they bought all the beers the entire time. This time, they demanded I give them my email so we could keep in contact. I even added their son on Facebook. 2 years later, I go and visit for the summer, and sure enough, there on the wall amongst the rest of their family pictures is 18-year-old me standing between them. I'll tell you all something. I'm a bit of an introvert and can be awkward when meeting new people, simply because I like to get a feel for who they are and where their boundaries are. But never in my life, other than with my own family, and maybe not even then, have I ever felt more at home and that I belonged than the 3 weeks I spent with them. We still talk weekly. It's like having a second family. In high school, my friends set me up with their boyfriend's cousin. Let's call him Jack. Jack and I were walking around an amusement park and started talking about recent family spring break vacations. Turns out, both Jack and I had been in Las Vegas during the same week. We stayed at the same hotel. The conversation changed subjects when Jack stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and said, "I saw you in Las Vegas." I thought he was full of crap. There's no way he would remember some random girl among the thousands of people there. He told me the exact place he saw me and that my sister and I were posing for a photo. We got back to my house and found the picture. There were Jack and his brother in the background. When I was in grade 2, our family moved from Manitoba to Arizona for a year due to a contract my dad was working. We rented out the house fully furnished for the year. While in Arizona, we flew to Alberta one weekend. On the flight from Arizona to Alberta, I sat beside a boy my age and we started talking. It went something like this. Me, what city are you from? Him, Winnipeg. Me too. What school do you go to? School name. Cool, I used to go there too. What street do you live on? Street name. I lived on that street. It turns out his family was renting our house while we were gone. So I was sitting beside the boy who was sleeping in my bed while we were in Arizona. When I was 13, I was on a family holiday in Venice. We were on a gondola touring the waterways of the city. We got halfway down a long passageway, and another gondola passes us by, carrying a man and a woman. The man and my dad lock eyes, exclaim one another's name, and have a quick handshake as our gondolas pass. Myself, brother, and mother sit quietly, pretty stunned, while the woman on the other boat explodes with, "What? Who's that? How do you know him?" We floated off in the other direction, comparatively swag and chill. Turns out it was a guy my dad went to university with and hadn't seen him since. They haven't even contacted one another since. It's crazy they recognized one another, considering they were both in their late 40s now, passing fleetingly on 2 gondolas in Venice. About 10 years ago, I tried to get into Six Flags with a tiny keychain Swiss Army knife. It literally had a dull 1-inch blade. They told me I could either throw it away, take it to my car a mile away, or rent a locker for like $10. So I decided to hide it in the planter. I looked down and saw a big piece of bark laying in the dirt and figured it would be a good hiding place. I picked it up and found another mini Swiss Army knife. I placed mine next to the first and went into the park. When I returned, the other knife was gone and a smiley face was etched into the dirt in its place. I went to a concert in Dallas and took 2 lawn chairs. They wouldn't let me bring them in, so being 6'5", I threw them on top of a very tall bush. No one would have even seen them, and hardly anyone will be able to reach them. As I'm pulling them down after the concert, I pulled down 4 of the exact same chair. I only brought 2 though. Up walks a guy who is as tall as I am, wearing the exact same Blink-182 tour shirt from 2009, and the other 2 chairs were his. It was pretty wild. We smoked a doob, did a tall guy high five, then parted ways. My family used to take little summer vacations. One summer, I was about 7 or 8. We stayed at a campground about 4 hours from home. There were a bunch of kids there, and one day we all started playing tag. I was it and was chasing another young boy, and when I tagged him, I pushed him too hard and he fell and broke his arm. I remember the scene vividly. Fast forward to college. I became good friends with my neighbor in the dorm, and we ended up getting a place together our sophomore year. The following year, no longer living together, we went out for a few beers and the topic of broken bones came up. I've only broken 1 bone, and it was my arm when I was 7. Some kid at a campground pushed me over while playing tag. It was me. Still can't believe it. Now is as great a time as any to recommend the movie Tag starring Jeremy Renner. It's really funny, and if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's based off of a true story of these guys who had a tag gang going for like 30 years. And there are so many different crazy ways they all tagged each other. And it's got a surprisingly emotional message. One time I parked, without even noticing, next to a car with the same license plate as me. I had a Massachusetts plate, she had a New Hampshire plate, both with the same 5-digit number. The weirder thing was that both of us had kept the plate as a novelty plate because the state wasn't making 5-digit plate numbers anymore, but a family member wanted to keep it. In my case, my dad wanted to keep his dad's plate. My first semester of college, I moved out of state. I was first to move into the apartment and had a few days to myself. After orientation, I found my new roommate sitting on his bed. When I introduced myself, he asked where I was from. When I told him, he said, "I used to have a friend named Simon." I said I used to have a friend named Will. We were best friends in 1st and 2nd grade until his family moved. When I was in high school, I was aimlessly playing around our library one day. Like any large public high school, our library had literally thousands of books quietly tucked away in shelves and rarely, if ever, touched. That day, I pulled a book at random from a shelf in the back and sat down to read it. After opening it, a slip of paper fell out, and I quickly recognized the dashed 10 digits written on it as a phone number. I hastily read the number, and it was my older sister's number, who had graduated my high school years earlier. Someone wrote her number and tucked it away into a random book in the back until I found it years later. My great-grandmother fainted when my mother told her she was getting married to my dad because my great-grandmother had gotten engaged to a guy with the same name as my dad, and both men had been stationed at the same fort. But great-grandmother's fiancé died. Fortunately, mom's fiancé did not. This one's a long one, so strap in. I once went camping with about 5 or so other friends. This was about 3 years ago now in Pisgah National Forest in the mountains of North Carolina. There are some amazing waterfalls in this area, one called Rainbow Falls. It's about 125 feet from river above to ground below. If you keep hiking past Rainbow Falls, there is a much smaller waterfall in the river above Rainbow Falls called Turtleback Falls. It's basically a very slippery rock with water running over it, which ends with about a 4 to 5 foot drop. This is really cool because you can climb up it using a rope someone attached to a tree above, walk out to the middle of the rock, and slide down. There's also another spot that's about a third of the way up the side of Rainbow Falls, where you can climb up some branches, then basically rappel down a rock face, shimmy out on a ledge, and jump about 30 to 40 feet into the nice, deep pool in the river at the bottom of the waterfall. It was when my friends and I had climbed out on the ledge and were about to jump when we noticed that there was another group of people hanging out in the river below us. They started cheering us on and encouraging us to jump, as it is slightly terrifying. Anyways, we ended up jumping, and once in the river below, we talked to the other group of people. They seemed pretty cool. Fast forward 1 year, we had so much fun a year earlier that we decided to go back again. This time, we camped a little further down the river, and we decided to climb on some rocks downriver from the waterfall, about 300 or 400 yards from the waterfall. I was climbing on one rock and found something that looked like a strap of some kind. Assuming it was trash, I didn't touch it, but when I pointed it out to one of my friends, he noticed it was actually a GoPro camera in a waterproof case, so we decided to keep it. Fast forward a couple days, my friend and I purchased a charger for that type of camera and decided to see what was on it. We start watching the video and see some guys climbing up the place where we jumped off the side of the waterfall in front of the cameraman who was also climbing. The cameraman starts to get closer, and we see something that made us instantly start to freak out. On the back left shoulder of the person in front of the cameraman was the exact tattoo that my friend has. When it gets even closer, we realize that the person on camera was my friend, who I was currently sitting right beside. Later, the cameraman gets up to the ledge and we see me and the rest of my friends from over a year ago. There are also some pictures and videos of us jumping from the ledge. We watched the rest of the video in a stunned state, and the last 30 minutes or so of footage is of the cameraman going up to the river above Rainbow Falls and sliding on Turtleback Falls, apparently losing his GoPro in the water after going over the falls. The camera sinks to the bottom, and you can even see fish swimming by and staring at the camera. Now, think about where we found the camera 400 to 500 yards downriver from the bottom of the large waterfall. So apparently, this camera made its way downriver over a 125-foot waterfall and got lodged in a rock 500 yards away, and my friends and I found it a year later with video footage of us from the previous year on it. It took us a little while to decide on this as being the most reasonable explanation. Edit. A lot of people are wondering if I knew the cameraman. The answer is no, I did not. I suspect he was one of the people I mentioned being at the bottom of the river while we were about to jump. We jumped off this rock multiple times, so he might have followed us up one of the times, although I don't specifically remember this. As a college sophomore, I went on a trip to France by myself. I was sitting in Notre Dame Cathedral listening to music when a girl I dated in high school sat down near me, totally at random. We were both speechless when we saw one another there, out of the blue, in a foreign country within a vast cathedral. All while Quasimodo looked down sadly, knowing his only love forever out of reach. This coincidence is straight up sorcery. Was kayaking with my family along a river, when I thought I would pull a fast one on my brother. So I yell, "Hey look, a bald eagle!" to my brother so I can do the whole "made you look" game, but to my surprise, he goes, "Cool." At this point, I think he's just messing with me, so I can't say the whole "made you look" thing. So then I look up, and a bald eagle swoops down, catches a fish, and flies to the other side of the river. One of the most magical coincidences ever. I'm an American who moved to Amsterdam some years ago, and my first year there on a random Saturday, I decided to head out for a drink. Sat down next to a cute German guy who was in town for the first time from 6 hours away, helping a friend move kind of thing, and it turns out he's doing a PhD in physics. I'm doing mine in astronomy and have a physics background, so we spent maybe 10 minutes discussing our research topics when he mentions offhand how he used to study in New Zealand. I get a confused look and then get all excited. "Johan, Professor W's E&M class in Auckland, first half of 2007. Freaked him out until I explained. I was a semester abroad student in Auckland that year, and not only were we in this same class, we even did homeworks together and such, but lost touch once I left the country, with no one having a clue what happened to the other, only to randomly run into each other 5 years later in a random bar in a random city on another continent. I don't know if I can ever top that one. It was pretty darn cool. I once burped 1 second before a power blackout in my neighborhood. It felt almighty. This happened to me a few months ago, and it was pretty darn improbable. I'm walking through Bay Area Rapid Transit. It's the train station that takes you to and from San Francisco and elsewhere, where an average of 375,000 people pass through daily. I walk up the escalator to my train and pass by an envelope lying on the ground. At first, I didn't think much of it, but I took a couple steps back to pick it up anyways. The next part freaked me out. I looked at the address, and it was addressed to me. I instantly look around to see if it was a practical joke or if I'm about to get assassinated or something. Neither of those were the case. The sender was a family friend. We'll call them the Johnsons. I knew that Mr. Johnson took the BART daily, but I had never personally ran into him. After work, I call him up and ask him about the letter. Turns out, he had about 300 letters with him on the BART and was going to send them out for his daughter's graduation party. What in the world were the chances of him dropping the one letter addressed to me out of the 300, combined with the chances of me being the one out of 375,000 people to pick it up? Pretty wild. I met my now husband at work. Turns out there are enough coincidences that my mom is seriously wondering whether we are distantly related. We were born in the same hospital 2 weeks apart. We then both moved about 500 miles away and ended up in the same university together. We moved from there another 100 miles away and worked in the same company. We both have relatives in the same area in Dublin. We both have a relative that worked in the same hotel in Dublin at about the same time back in the 1930s. My mom and his grandmother had the exact same combination of unusual first and middle names, and I have the same birthday as his mom. We don't live in Ireland. Edit, when I say birthday, I mean month and day. I am not old enough to be his mom. Also, I'm pretty sure I would have remembered giving birth.